Our story begins when he discovers a small convenience store that allows him to travel between reality and a post-apocalyptic world. He expected to be torn to pieces by countless zombies, but the shop possesses a miraculous quality, absolute defense. And so he begins selling cheap instant noodles, bottled water, and sausages at incredibly high prices to the desperate survivors. In this dangerous wasteland, he is about to build a commercial empire of his very own. The danger is everywhere, lurking in every corner of this ruined world. At this moment, we see him holding a phone that is burning hot in his hand. The tension is rising as he prepares for the next step in his journey. He had struggled through 3 different jobs, trying to find his footing in a harsh reality. He had gained a convenience store that could traverse freely between the apocalypse and the real world. Despite the threat of the undead, the shop remained an impenetrable fortress against the chaos outside. He decided to sell basic supplies for a fortune, turning simple snacks into luxury goods. Amidst the perils of the wasteland, he began laying the foundation for his future business kingdom. But back in reality, he was listening to his girlfriend's cold voice telling him they were breaking up. It turns out that after 3 years of graduation, he had no savings and had cycled through several failing jobs. His girlfriend, unable to endure his poverty any longer, left him for a wealthy man named Wang Hao. After the call ended, he sat slumped on a stool, exhausted from years of paying for his parents' medical bills. He had gone into massive debt, yet his parents still passed away, leaving him with nothing but unpaid loans. All he had left was this struggling little shop, but suddenly, the world began to spin violently. As the atmosphere shifted around him, he realized with a shock that he had been transported to the end of the world. Through the window, he saw a horde of zombies, their attention drawn to the sudden appearance of his mysterious shop. In the next second, the zombies lunged toward him, and he thought he was finished as they slammed against the glass. But the sound of shattering glass never came. The door, which should have broken instantly, didn't move an inch. And this is where things get interesting, as a glowing light screen suddenly appeared before his eyes. It informed him that if he could simply stay here for 12 hours, he would be able to return to his own world. He glanced at the monsters outside and frustratedly rubbed his head, looking around his tiny shop of less than 20 square meters. The shelves were packed with various goods: beef noodles, bottled water, sausages, bread, and biscuits. In his original world, these items combined weren't worth much, but here, well, that was a different story entirely. A realization began to take root deep in his mind. In a wasteland, the most precious thing isn't gold. It isn't diamonds either. It is clean food and water. He rushed over to the shelves with newfound purpose. He picked up an ordinary bottle of water that usually sold for a mere 2 yuan back home. He wondered what it was worth in this zombie-infested world, remembering the crushing debt of 350,000 yuan. He thought of Zhang Qian's cold voice telling him it was over, then twisted the cap and took a heavy gulp of water. He decided to use these 12 hours to earn his first fortune, and he was already beginning to calculate the exchange. 1 bottle of water for a gram of gold. No, that was too little. Perhaps 10 grams of gold per bottle. A pack of instant noodles for 100 grams? He forced himself to calm down, knowing he first needed actual customers. With a dozen zombies blocking the entrance, no survivor would ever dare to approach the shop. But he refused to just sit and wait for 12 hours, and soon his gaze fell upon the braised beef noodles. A plan began to form. In a world filled with the stench of rust and decay, he had a secret weapon. After all, what could be more enticing than the aroma of hot noodles? He plugged in the kettle and flipped the switch. The kettle began to bubble and hiss. It seemed the convenience store even had power, which was a stroke of luck. It seemed this space, bound by the system, was completely independent of the outside world, a realm of its own. The water boiled quickly, and a rich, overpowering aroma instantly exploded throughout the small shop. He couldn't help but swallow his own saliva, but a new problem quickly presented itself. How could he send this enticing scent outside without opening the door? He paced around the shop, searching for a way. His gaze finally locked onto an exhaust fan, and soon the thick fragrance began drifting through that small passage. The scent floated out into the silent, dead world outside as the minutes slowly ticked away. Outside, there was still a deathly silence, and just as his patience was beginning to run thin, a sudden burst of flames swept toward the dozen zombies. He watched warily as a woman appeared outside. Her eyes scanned the store, which looked entirely out of place amidst the surrounding ruins. She moved to step inside, but in the next second, she slammed directly into an invisible glass wall. After a moment of silence, he spoke up, making his terms clear. He wanted gold. He told her firmly that he only accepted gold here, maintaining a surprisingly dominant stance for a shopkeeper. The woman, Yang, raised her hand and sent a spark of fire flying straight toward his face. However, the flame vanished completely the moment it touched the barrier, a very effective security system, to be honest. He asked if they could talk business now. Yang relented, calling him boss and asking the price of the noodles. He asked for 100 grams of gold. She was outraged, asking why he didn't just rob her instead. Even if gold was currently as worthless as scrap metal, she argued it wasn't exactly lying around in the streets. He simply told her she didn't have to buy it, then ignored her to start eating the freshly made noodles himself. The sound of him slurping the noodles was loud, and we see Yang's throat move as she involuntarily swallowed. Deep down, she realized she couldn't even remember the last time she had eaten a hot, proper meal. In her daily life, she relied on scavenged canned goods and energy bars, things that could sustain life, but little else. They offered no pleasure to the palate, and right then, her stomach let out a soft growl, though it was faint. In such a silent environment, it sounded like a clap of thunder, and Yang's cheeks instantly flushed a deep crimson. He acted as if he hadn't heard a thing, continuing to enjoy his noodles. She admitted she didn't have enough gold and asked for credit. But this shop didn't do credit. He wasn't there for charity. Besides, he would be leaving in less than 12 hours. There was no telling if Yang would return with the gold in time. Finally, he finished the very last bite of his meal. He let out a satisfied burp and casually grabbed a ham sausage from the shelf, flicking it toward her with his finger. It traced a perfect arc through the air, thrown with the casual indifference one might show when feeding a stray cat. Yang's body froze instantly. To her, this felt like a blatant insult, yet her logic told her something very different. She knew she should pick up that sausage and eat it immediately. For a moment, time seemed to stand still. Ultimately, after 2.5 seconds of internal struggle, her hunger emerged victorious over her pride. In just 3 bites, the sausage was gone. She told him this was her sincerity, agreeing to the price. 100 grams of gold in exchange for a single bowl of noodles. If she could find a survivor settlement or an old bank vault, gathering that much gold wouldn't actually be too difficult. But just as she turned to leave, he called out to her. He slowly and deliberately pulled out a can of cola. The legendary Coca-Cola, a drink found everywhere before the apocalypse, but in this new world. It was a luxury far greater than any fine wine. He priced it at 50 grams of gold, and before she could even respond, he tore open a pack of spicy strips. These, he noted, were cheaper, only 30 grams of gold per pack. Ice cola, spicy snacks, and hot noodles. Before the world ended, these were the cheapest of treats, yet here they were treasures. She told him he'd better have enough stock ready, and then her figure vanished into the ruins. She was going to find gold. At this very moment, we see that the dimensional travel ability still has 10.5 hours left on its cooldown. He began to inspect his remaining inventory, 10 boxes of instant noodles and 15 crates of bottled water. Spicy snacks and ham sausages were in plentiful supply, and he even managed to find 5 eggs tucked away in a corner. A new idea began to take shape in his mind. Over an hour later, a loud noise echoed outside. Yang had returned. She looked a bit disheveled, clutching a black bag containing 200 grams of gold, not a single milligram less. The system asked if the item should be allowed into the safe zone. After he silently gave his permission, the black bag was lifted by an invisible hand, floating gently through the air before landing softly at his feet. Yang's pupils contracted in shock once again. To her, this man was becoming far more mysterious and unpredictable than she imagined. After counting the payment, he brought out the beef noodles, the iced cola, and the snacks right in front of her. He boiled another pot of water and walked to the door with the steaming bowl. Just as Yang assumed, he was about to hand the food over, he suddenly stopped. He pulled an egg from his pocket and looked at her. He asked if she'd like an egg with that. The price? Another 50 grams of gold for a single egg. She asked if he was trying to rob her, but he simply noted that the eggs were reserved for those destined to have them. As he moved to put the egg back in his bag, she called out for him to wait. Yang was a powerful flame awakener, accustomed to others bowing to her will. Yet today she found herself constantly on the losing end of the deal. The words, "I don't want it," were stuck in her throat. Instead, she reached into a small leather pouch at her waist. A crystal the size of a pigeon's egg lay quietly in the palm of her hand, shimmering with a strange light. She admitted she had no more gold for the moment and offered this in exchange for the egg. He raised an eyebrow. He wondered what this strange object could possibly be. Just as he was about to refuse, a notification screen appeared. The system detected a high-energy source and strongly recommended completing the trade. It seemed he had nearly made a mistake. It turns out he had been looking at his little shop all wrong, focusing entirely on how to pay off that massive debt. In reality, the shop's true purpose involved these energy crystals. In a single moment, everything finally clicked for him. Yet, he kept his expression dismissive, acting as if this priceless stone was just some disgusting, useless pebble. Yang explained it was an energy crystal from a zombie's brain, a necessity for awakeners, making gold look like common dirt. So, these crystals were the world's cultivation resource. Still, he wondered what use a shopkeeper would have for such things. Yang trembled with rage. This man wasn't just stubborn, he seemed utterly blind to the value of the world's greatest treasure. Seeing her on the verge of an absolute meltdown, he let out a long, weary sigh and decided to relent. Since she was being so sincere, he told her he'd make an exception, and with a silent command to the system, the crystal vanished instantly from Yang's palm. He didn't even give it a second glance as it disappeared. He casually stuffed the crystal into his pocket before presenting the deluxe egg edition instant noodles to his customer, along with the cola and spicy snacks. He set the meal before Yang, who began to eat with a desperate intensity. She didn't even leave a single green onion behind, downing the cola in one go before finally tearing into the snacks. He watched her in silence until she finished. "I'll be back," Yang declared, leaving those words hanging in the air. She turned and vanished into the darkness of the street corner. Only after she was gone did he pull out the crystal. It was a low-level zombie crystal, capable of breaking genetic locks with a chance to turn the user into an awakener. However, failure meant instant disintegration. With a success rate below 1%, his hand gave a sudden, violent twitch. He nearly dropped the thing. To him, a 1% success rate didn't look like an opportunity at all. It looked more like a one-way ticket to the afterlife. But then, the shop system suddenly displayed a new notification. Within the shop's boundaries, the host was immune to all harm, including physical damage, energy surges, and even genetic collapse. With that safety net in place, he looked down at the energy crystal in his hand with a very different expression. For him, this was a zero-risk, high-reward situation. As for how to use it, well, he simply had to swallow it. The thing didn't exactly look edible, but then we remember Yang conjuring flames out of thin air, and it all made sense. He swallowed the crystal directly. A second later, a wave of violent, agonizing pain surged through his entire body. He curled up like a shrimp as time ticked by, until finally, the pain receded and was replaced by something else. A sudden, overwhelming sense of power filled him. He wondered if this was the strength of an awakener. It felt terrifying. He tried to mimic Yang's pose, waiting for flames to appear, but absolutely nothing happened at his fingertips. How frustrating. The more he thought about a failed awakening, the angrier he got, eventually slamming his fist into a nearby shelf. Suddenly, the shelf and all the snacks on it vanished, and his consciousness was suddenly linked to another dimension. Within that space sat the missing shelf. He reached out, and just like that, the shelf returned to its original spot. Only then did the system provide a notification. Our young shopkeeper had awakened a dimensional warehouse that could isolate space-time. With a single thought, he could store or retrieve items within a 1 cubic meter space. He began practicing with a pack of spicy snacks. Putting them in and taking them out, he gradually fell into deep thought. Gold could solve his debt, but it wasn't everything. These energy crystals were the true prize. However, his dimensional travel still had a 9-hour cooldown period. He needed to stockpile as many crystals as possible before leaving. After all, the scent of one bowl of noodles had lured in Yang. He wondered what would happen if he amplified that scent 10 or 20 times. To find out, he pulled out a massive cooking pot. This was to be his apocalyptic Buddha jumps over the wall. Meanwhile, 3 blocks away in an abandoned building, a group huddled in the dark. A man with a scar was cleaning his gun while a man in glasses noted with concern that Xiao Lu's injuries were worsening. If they didn't find medicine soon, he wouldn't make it. The scarred man, known as Brother Hu, simply nodded in grim silence. The food in this neighborhood had been picked clean long ago, and medicine was a pipe dream. But right at that moment, a rich, savory aroma drifted into the room. Someone was cooking noodles outside, but Brother Hu immediately told them to shut up. His logic told him this was undoubtedly a trap. In the middle of an apocalypse, anyone cooking so brazenly was either a madman or a hunter with absolute power. And yet, his body, already tortured by days of starvation, let out a series of primal growls. Find him, eat him. Even the man in glasses was getting desperate. He urged Brother Hu that they were running out of time, and if they arrived late, not even the broth would remain. Brother Hu knew better than anyone that they would eventually starve, so with a ruthless glint in his eyes, he gave the order to move. They navigated through the winding streets until they spotted a small convenience store with a massive electric pot sitting right at the entrance. Inside the pot were instant noodles and sausages, while our young shopkeeper leaned casually against the doorframe. Quite the picture of relaxation. It was a trap, it had to be. Their Adam's apples bobbed as they swallowed hard, yet none of them dared to take a single step forward. Suddenly, Brother Hu spotted a man lurking behind a nearby abandoned vehicle, who noticed them in return. The stranger quickly made a gesture for silence. As Brother Hu calmed his nerves, he began to notice even more people hiding in the shadows. There was a blurry figure in a second-floor window to the left, and a metallic glint coming from behind a trash heap in the alleyway. At least 4 different groups had been lured in by the scent. Inside the shop, he was well aware of the crowd gathering outside. He spoke up, his voice not loud, yet it reached the ears of every hidden lurker. "Friends, haven't you watched long enough? Aren't you hungry?" When no one responded, he simply fished a sausage out of the pot and popped it into his mouth. To be honest, it looked delicious. He announced that he was open for business and preferred making money over trouble, offering plenty of noodles, water, and sausages for everyone. Finally, the man behind the abandoned car couldn't resist asking for the price. The answer? Gold or energy crystals. Everyone froze in confusion. Crystals made sense as a hard currency, but in this wasteland, gold was practically worthless. A furious roar erupted from behind the trash heap, accusing him of playing games. Apparently, some people have very short tempers. The voice claimed the boy had no intention of trading and suggested they kill him and split the food among themselves. As those words hung in the air, the atmosphere became incredibly tense. Everyone began to calculate their next move very, very quickly. Without even looking up from his noodles, he calmly told them they were welcome to try, but he had a warning for anyone who dared to make a move. They would immediately lose their right to trade, forced to stand by and watch while everyone else enjoyed their hot soup and noodles. The man behind the trash heap had finally had enough, cursing as he pulled out a shotgun, refusing to believe the boy's bluff. Two more men emerged behind him, armed with machetes and steel pipes, while everyone else waited in breathless anticipation. They were waiting for a sacrificial lamb to test his defenses, and the man didn't hesitate to pull the trigger. However, the bullet stopped abruptly. At exactly 2.5 meters away, it struck an invisible wall. Throughout the entire ordeal, he hadn't even blinked. In fact, he didn't even twitch an eyebrow as he fished out another sausage and popped it into his mouth. Talk about nerves of steel. The entire square fell into an eerie, frozen silence. Even the man's companions, still clutching their machetes and pipes, were paralyzed with shock. They stood there like statues, but meanwhile, the man behind the abandoned vehicle seemed to realize something important. If physical attacks were useless, perhaps something non-physical would work? An invisible surge of energy began to gather in his palm. He unleashed a burst of telekinetic force toward the shop, his special ability, known as telekinetic piercing. Yet, when this mental shockwave hit the shop's perimeter, it failed to create even the slightest ripple in the air. At that moment, everyone understood the terrifying truth. Inside that little shop, he was absolutely invincible. Brother, whose back was already soaked in cold sweat. He felt an overwhelming sense of relief that he hadn't acted on impulse just moments ago. It was a very narrow escape, indeed. Finally finishing his noodles, he turned his gaze toward the man behind the trash heap and reminded him of what he had said earlier. Those who attack lose their chance to trade. He then asked the shadows if anyone else was feeling particularly brave. The area plunged back into a deathly silence, the suffocating tension enough to drive a person mad. And then, the silence was broken. The rhythmic clicking of high heels echoed from the distance, drawing closer and closer until every eye turned toward the source of the sound. It was Nightingale, Brother, who recognized her immediately. In fact, any survivor who had lasted this long in the ruins knew that name. She was a top-tier awakened who used fire as her weapon. What on earth was someone like her doing in a place like this? You've certainly caused quite a stir, Nightingale remarked, noting that there are always those who refuse to believe in the impossible. She warned the crowd to put away their foolish thoughts, stating that neither their scrap metal weapons nor even her own powers could leave so much as a scratch on this shop. Once again, the entire square fell into a deathly, heavy silence. Brother, who took a deep breath and slowly stepped out into the open, his hands spread wide to show he meant no harm. One by one, the lurkers in the other corners began to reveal themselves, while Nightingale simply ignored them all. She pulled several items from her belt, 3 shimmering gold bars, each weighing a substantial 100 grams. She demanded biscuits, canned goods, and water, essentially any food that was easy to carry and could be stored long-term. For a top-tier hunter like her, these ready-to-eat industrial foods were the most rational choice for survival. Since he always preferred doing business with smart people, he brought out compressed biscuits, canned luncheon meat, and bottled water. The transaction was completed easily under the watchful eyes of the crowd. Nightingale took the food and vanished back into the darkness. Now, every gaze in the square refocused on him, but this time, the hostility and testing were gone. Only pure, unadulterated longing remained. He told them it was their turn, asking if they all understood the rules by now. Gold or energy cores in exchange for food, though, naturally, the man who fired the shot was excluded. That man finally broke. He scrambled forward, throwing himself at the shop's edge, begging for forgiveness and a single bite of food. He pleaded that even a sip of the leftover soup would be enough to save him. While others felt lucky they hadn't acted on impulse, he simply repeated his rule: those who attack lose their right to trade. Ignoring the man's desperate cries, he scanned the crowd and asked who else was ready to make a deal. Brother, who stepped forward and presented an energy core. With a simple thought, the core vanished into the shop's inventory. Without a word, he turned and prepared 3 large bowls, filling them to the brim with steaming noodles and sausages. Holding the warm bowl, Brother, who felt a long-forgotten sense of comfort as the 3 men began to eat like starving wolves. Once the first person took the risk, the rest could no longer hold back, shouting that they wanted to trade too. I have gold cores, said the man who had previously tried to ambush him, stepping forward with a lowered head. He silently produced 2 cores, unable to meet his gaze, and he accepted them without a word, handing over a bowl. Once the floodgates of trade were opened, there was no closing them, as people began offering up their gold jewelry. Others brought gold cores of all different sizes, and soon, over a dozen of them were piled high beneath the counter. As the large pot of noodles began to dwindle, the 3 men from earlier suddenly spiraled into a state of desperate madness. If I can't eat, then no one will, one screamed, lunging at a frail survivor and sending noodles and soup flying everywhere. The other survivors stopped mid-bite, their eyes turning cold and filled with a silent, simmering rage toward the rule-breaker. We see him stop serving the noodles, simply watching the farce unfold with a calm, detached expression. Suddenly, a flash of fire erupted, and the man didn't even have time to let out a single scream. He was reduced to a pile of ash in an instant, and his 2 companions quickly followed him into oblivion. In less than 3 seconds, all 3 had vanished from the world, as Nightingale slowly stepped out from the shadows. She remarked that she simply hated those who broke the rules, and he tossed her a can of cola without saying a word. He went back to stirring the noodles, and from that point on, the trading proceeded in a state of absolute harmony. Brother Hu and his 2 men finished their meal, having drained every last drop of the savory soup from their bowls. More and more people emerged from the corners of the ruins, and the shop's shelves began to empty at a staggering speed. No one complained about the prices or caused any trouble, and eventually, every single item in the shop was sold out. Nightingale tossed aside her empty cola can and approached him, noting that he'd made a fortune and asking when he'd return. He admitted he didn't know, and after giving him a long, searching look, she turned and vanished back into the darkness. Once everyone had departed and the square fell silent, he used a simple thought to open his dimensional warehouse. Inside, we see the haul is staggering, over 100 kilograms of gold and 33 golden cores. He knew that consuming the cores would bring agonizing pain, yet he didn't hesitate for a second before swallowing them all. This time, it wasn't just pain, but a force beyond imagination. Had he not been inside his shop, he likely would have been torn to pieces by the sheer energy. In the midst of that extreme agony, he finally absorbed the last trace of power. When he opened his eyes, he noticed a flying insect on the ceiling. To his surprise, the rapid flapping of the insect's wings appeared to be moving in slow motion. He could hear the low gurgles of zombies outside and smell the metallic scent of blood mixed with damp earth. His senses had been sharpened to an almost terrifying degree, and he reached out toward a nearby shelf. With a slight tremor, the shelf slowly began to levitate. This wasn't the warehouse's power, but telekinesis. He immediately pulled up the system interface to see his status, awakened, with the dimensional warehouse. The capacity had reached 1,000 cubic meters, and he had gained a new ability, telekinetic control. He could now manipulate objects within 50 meters. He had actually awakened to second power. For the remaining time, he waited patiently for the countdown to end. As the familiar distortion returned, he was pulled back to his original world. The foul stench of rust and decay vanished instantly, and in its place came the fresh scent of damp earth and green grass. The dimensional transit was complete. He was back on Earth, with 12 hours remaining until the next jump. It was still dark outside. He returned to his folding bed for a few hours of sleep, and by 9 in the morning, he arrived at an old antique shop. He asked the owner if he was buying gold, and the man cautiously inquired about the quality and the source. Instead of answering, he placed 2 gold bars on the counter. The heavy thud made the owner sit up straight immediately. After a 10-minute inspection, the owner offered 580,000, but he held out for 700,000. "Little brother, that price is too high," the owner argued, noting the risks and the palms he'd have to grease. 70,000. The shopkeeper fell silent for a long half-minute before finally relenting, and soon, a transfer of 700,000 arrived in the account. Walking out of the market, he immediately dialed the debt collector's number. A voice on the other end barked, "Hello? Who is this?" "Oh, so you finally decided to call," the man sneered. "Did you get the money?" He replied calmly, "Yes. The abandoned cement plant number 3. 3 in the afternoon. Bring the money and come alone." And so, the meeting was set for 3 o'clock at the desolate plant. Brother Biao stood there with 7 or 8 henchmen backing him up. Seeing him actually arrive alone, Biao spat out his cigarette butt. "Where's the money?" he demanded. When asked for the IOU, Biao grinned, claiming prices had risen and his boys needed to eat. He then held up 5 fingers, demanding 500,000. "Pay that, and I'll burn the debt note right in front of you." Our protagonist always despised those who broke the rules. He had intended to pay 350,000, but now, only 200. His voice wasn't loud, yet everyone present heard him with perfect clarity. Brother Biao's expression froze in a mask of disbelief. He couldn't believe his ears. "How much did you say?" 200,000, he repeated. "Not a penny more." Biao erupted in a curse. A lackey nearby swung a steel pipe with lethal intent, yet the expected scene of a bloody skull simply didn't happen. The pipe stopped dead just 10 centimeters away, caught by his hand with an air of complete indifference. It was almost effortless, really. The thug was sent flying as if struck by a freight train, his agonizing screams echoing throughout the entire cement plant. Brother Biao finally snapped out of his shock and roared for his men to attack all at once. "Get him!" However, no amount of numbers could withstand a few well-placed elbow strikes. Before long, the thugs were all collapsed on the ground. Biao's entire body began to tremble violently, not from rage, but from pure, unadulterated terror. "You, don't come any closer. I'm telling you, my big brother is." He didn't finish, hurriedly fumbling to pull out a stack of papers. "The IOU. Here." He took the papers for his 200,000, tore the debt note to shreds, and walked away. That matter, at least, was settled. But he had far more important things to do. He headed to a used car market, and shortly after, he was driving away in a second-hand van. He drove straight to the city's largest food wholesale center, and before the clerk could even greet him, he spoke up. "Hello, I need 200 cases of instant noodles, 100 cases of ham sausages, and 200 cases of compressed biscuits." He added 100 cases of canned beef and 500 pounds of mineral water. The clerk was understandably shocked by the volume. But business is business, and they quickly prepared the goods. After all, anyone with cash is a welcome guest. It took the entire day for our protagonist, Xiaogua, to finish hauling and clearing out the massive stock of supplies. He knew that relying on just a few people to scavenge ruins was slow. To maximize profit, he needed to scale up. The plan was to partner with various strongholds and let them collect the gold. As he felt the power coursing through his body, he felt a strange sense of detachment from his past life. With only 2 hours remaining, he made a simple decision. He decided to treat himself to a final, magnificent meal as a way to say goodbye to the person he used to be. And so, he drove to the most luxurious restaurant in the city. Compared to the luxury cars lined up at the entrance, his second-hand van looked completely out of place. Even the valet assumed he was just looking for a free parking spot. But Xiaoguo simply pulled out a small gold bean and handed it over. "Park the car," he said, cutting the man off. The heavy, solid weight of the gold bean in the valet's hand caused the man to freeze in utter shock. Xiaoguo didn't look back, walking calmly into the restaurant. The soft lighting and well-dressed guests created an air of luxury. Everything here was elegant and composed, a world away from the brutal extremes of the apocalypse he had witnessed. As he looked over the menu, a woman's voice called out his name. It was his ex-girlfriend, Zhang Shi. Beside her stood Wang Hao, a wealthy heir. After a brief moment of surprise, Wang Hao smirked and led Zhang Shi over. "Well, if it isn't Xiaoguo, is the shop closed? Your entire monthly salary might barely cover a single bite here." Xiaoguo ignored the taunt entirely. "Just have the chef prepare his best dishes," he told the waiter. "Whatever he's best at." Wang Hao felt as though his insult had landed on thin air. This feeling of being completely ignored was, to be honest, infuriating. And so, her voice rose another octave as she snapped. "Are you deaf? I'm talking to you." But Xiaoguo's face remained entirely expressionless, and Zhangxi suddenly felt as if she were looking at a complete stranger. Hearing the commotion, the restaurant manager rushed over and politely asked the group to remain calm to avoid disturbing other guests. Seeing the manager, Wang Hao's arrogance only grew. "Manager Zhou, you're just in time. What kind of riffraff are you letting in these days? Allowing someone like this to sit here is quite literally lowering the standards of your entire establishment." Manager Zhou certainly recognized Wang Hao, knowing he was the son of a prominent local real estate tycoon. However, noting Xiaoguo's unusual composure, the manager replied firmly, "Mr. Wang, our restaurant treats every guest with the same respect." When Xiaoguo asked if there was a private room available, Manager Zhou immediately gave him a deep, 90-degree bow. "Mr. Xiaoguo, I am terribly sorry. It was our poor hospitality that disturbed your dining mood." He quickly had a waiter lead Xiaoguo to a private room, and through it all, our protagonist never once looked at Wang Hao. Wang Hao tried to protest, but Manager Zhou cut him off, stating, "Mr. Wang, please stop this shouting immediately. Otherwise, I will have no choice but to ask security to escort you and this lady out of the building." Inside the private room, a variety of exquisite dishes were served, delicacies he once couldn't even dream of affording. But after tasting them, he realized they weren't all that special. After dinner, he returned to his small shop. At this point, only 150 seconds remained before his next transition. When the time finally ran out, the hustle and bustle of the city vanished instantly, replaced by the deathly silence of the wasteland. We noticed that the 12-hour cooldown for the transition had now decreased to 11 hours. He suspected that as the number of transitions increased, he might eventually be able to travel between worlds without any limits. He could feel numerous eyes watching him from the shadows nearby, lurking in the ruins. It seemed the survivors from his last visit had already spread the word about the mysterious shop to every corner of the area. The newcomers were no longer just scattered survivors from the airport road, but scouts sent by a formal organization. About 10 minutes passed before a man finally detached himself from the shadows and walked toward the small shop. The man, carrying a rifle on his back, stopped right in front of the door and introduced himself as Xiezi. He explained that he represented the Panshur stronghold and wanted to talk business. Specifically, they needed a massive amount of supplies. They were looking for food, water, medicine, and even weapons, but Xiaoguo calmly informed him that he didn't sell arms. Xiezi showed no sign of disappointment. It seemed he had already expected that particular answer. He reached into his pocket, pulled out a solid gold bar, and placed it on the table as a down payment. He expressed their desire for a long-term partnership, hoping for a more favorable price in return for their loyalty. Xiaoguo replied that his prices were the same for everyone, just as several subtle movements stirred in the shadows behind the scout. Xiezi raised a hand in a calming gesture to his hidden companions, insisting they were sincere, but our protagonist remained silent. Instead, he gestured toward the canned meat on the shelf, watching as it drifted through the air and landed softly on the counter. Xiezi's pupils contracted instantly at the sight of telekinesis. He had assumed the shop's only defense was its unbreakable walls. He hadn't expected Xiaoguo to be a powerful awaken himself. 1 box of cans for 1 gold bar. That was the deal. Xiezi pressed for a more exact quantity, needing to know exactly how much stock was actually available. This, of course, was one of the primary goals of his visit. Xiaoguo simply chuckled and snapped his fingers. Suddenly, a small mountain of bottled mineral water appeared out of thin air right on the floor. The sight left Xiezi's brain frozen for a good few seconds. Xiaoguo asked if that was enough, adding that if it wasn't, he could provide more, snapping his fingers again to summon another mountain, this time of compressed biscuits. Xiezi swallowed hard, realizing the man before him possessed not only telekinesis but also a rare spatial ability. When asked again about the price, Xiaoguo repeated his firm terms, 1 gold bar for 1 box of cans. Xiezi declared they would take everything, though gathering the gold would take time, offering it for the scattered items on the shelves. Xiaoguo countered that for bulk orders, they would need to pay a different price. Gold bars alone wouldn't be enough for such a trade. Xiezi argued those were the source of an awakened's power and the foundation of their stronghold, but Xiaoguo simply noted that was their problem. As soon as he spoke, the 2 mountains of supplies vanished into thin air, making it clear who held the initiative in this negotiation. The power had been in Xiaoguo's hands from the start. If Xiezi refused, other strongholds would surely accept the terms instead. Eventually, the Panshur stronghold would collapse and dissolve, so Xiezi conceded and asked for a specific exchange rate. The price was set, 100 gold bars plus 10 gold boxes for the water, while the biscuits would cost double that amount. Xiezi clenched his fists tightly at his side. To be honest, this wasn't just a steep price. It felt like a daylight robbery. He took a deep breath, forcing himself to remain calm, and stated that he needed to return and report this to his leader. He left the gold bar on the table as a fee for the information, and Xiaoguo gave a simple, silent nod of acknowledgement. Our protagonist pocketed the gold bar without a word as Xiezi slowly retreated back into the safety of the darkness. Returning to the counter, he began to leisurely wipe down the already spotless surface, and 10 minutes passed in quiet solitude. Then, 3 new figures emerged, a middle-aged man wearing glasses, followed closely by 2 disciplined soldiers. The man introduced himself as Professor G from the lighthouse shelter, but Xiaoguo remained silent, offering no immediate greeting. He simply watched the man, who began explaining that from an economic perspective, this business model was completely unsustainable. He argued that if the strongholds lost too many gold boxes, they would inevitably collapse under the pressure. The professor asked who would buy the goods then, but Xiaoguo pointed out that the remaining items would simply become more valuable. The smile on Professor G's face froze completely. He realized Xiaoguo didn't care about systems or the future of the world at all. The power to set prices belonged to him alone, and at that moment, Ying stepped out from the shadows toward the counter. She placed a single gold box before him, and without wasting any words, he handed over a box of self-heating rice. A can of beef and 2 bottles of mineral water were handed over. Ying took them and turned to leave, the entire process completed in total silence. Professor G's so-called rational analysis had become a complete joke. 100 gold bars plus 10 gold boxes was the price. We see Xiaoguo agree to exchange the water, but with a catch. The price had just gone up because the professor's chatter wasted 3 minutes. Now, the cost was 15 gold boxes. The man before them agreed immediately, realizing he had no other choice. Perhaps he wasn't the strongest awakened in the wasteland, but in this shop, his word was absolute law. Professor G pulled a military communicator from his coat, ordering his people to bring 100 gold bars to the location. He also demanded 15 gold boxes be brought along. About 20 minutes later, the deal was ready to be finalized. The roar of vehicle engines echoed from the distance, and 2 heavy metal chests were placed directly in front of Xiaoguo. One chest was filled to the brim with gold bars, while the other contained the 15 requested gold boxes. Xiaoguo tossed the crates of water beyond the boundary line in return. Once the transaction was finished, the atmosphere shifted. Several figures slowly emerged from the darkness. Xiezi had returned, and this time, he brought a squad of 20 men with him. Both groups faced each other instinctively, but Xiezi ignored the soldiers, announcing they had brought exactly what was requested. Several boxes were opened, revealing not just the gold bars, but 20 gold boxes, 10 more than the original asking price. Xiezi used this direct action to show his loyalty and attitude, causing Professor G's face to turn paler than a corpse. Even in the apocalypse, it seems people are still trying to outdo one another. With a wave of his hand, Xiaoguo pulled piles of biscuits from his storage. He added several cases of canned beef, telling them it was a gift. For a moment, Xiezi's breathing grew sharp and hurried. He had made the right gamble. He bowed deeply to Xiaoguo before turning a cold, sharp gaze toward Professor G. He stated firmly that the Panshur stronghold had come only for the trade, making their presence and intentions very clear. Behind Xiezi, the sound of weapons being cocked filled the air. The lighthouse people hissed a few words through gritted teeth and retreated. Xiaoguo watched it all quietly. It was truly interesting. One side built on technology and knowledge, yet both were desperate for his goods. One side valued force and discipline above all else. After the lighthouse group departed, Xiezi bowed deeply to Xiaoguo once more. His team also withdrew quickly. Through these 2 transactions, Xiaoguo had successfully acquired another 100 kilograms of gold. The quiet didn't last long. This time, 3 separate convoys approached from different directions, accompanied by the distant, hungry roars of zombies. As the sounds echoed from all sides, the 3 factions simultaneously issued orders to their men to prepare for combat. On one side, heavy machine guns and rifles barked in bursts. On the other, awakened warriors unleashed a barrage of fireballs and ice spears. Once the final zombie was dropped with a headshot, a temporary peace returned to the square. "Boss," a voice called out. "We from Battle Axe have something to say. Our art group is also very sincere." Xiaoguo simply pointed. "Start the line over there." Battle Axe was one of the actual rulers of this eastern district. To be honest, they weren't exactly used to waiting in lines. "Boss, what is the meaning of this? We came here in good faith and even cleared out the zombies for you." I said, "Get in line. If the people of Battle Axe won't follow the rules, then I won't sell you a single thing. We Battle Axe have quite a reputation in this district. Making a friend like us wouldn't hurt you, you know." Xiaoguo remained unmoved. "I don't care about having one more friend or one less. Either follow the rules or leave." If they lined up, where would the dignity of Battle Axe go? The bald leader let out a low growl, seemingly reaching a decision. He waved a hand to the men behind him. "Bring the stuff over. I'm going to be the first to buy today, no matter what." Two members of Battle Axe carried a heavy metal chest forward. Xiaoguo's eyes went cold. Someone broke the rules. The trade is over. With a simple wave of his hand, he vanished every single item of supply back into his resource warehouse. In an instant, the entire shop became completely empty. The other two factions turned toward the bald man with looks of pure fury. "I brought gold and gold boxes just to give you face," the bald man snarled. "Don't you dare throw it back at me." In the Eastern District, no one ignores Battle Axe. "Who do you think you are?" Xiaoguo sighed. "I really hate the sound of dogs barking." "Fire! Turn this pathetic shack into dust." A dense hail of bullets instantly tore through the air toward the little shop. But every single bullet was deflected by an invisible shield. He declared that not only would he never sell another scrap to Battle Axe, but he would also offer 100 crates of beef to buy the leader's life. Every member of Battle Axe froze in their tracks. With a casual wave of his hand, a mountain of beef cans appeared on the ground. Suddenly, everyone's attention shifted toward the bald leader. He roared, asking if they were planning a rebellion, reminding them he was their third in command. The art group immediately accepted the bounty, and the Feng Chao group followed suit. Then, the leader turned to his own men. He asked if they intended to betray him too. The members of Battle Axe looked at one another, but no one dared to meet his eyes. In the apocalypse, loyalty is often the cheapest commodity available. Suddenly, a sharp blade pierced the bald leader's chest. The one who struck was his own deputy. The leader gasped, asking why, but the deputy's face remained entirely expressionless. He simply noted that the brothers needed to eat too. Then, he turned to the shop and announced the job was done. He claimed the reward for Battle Axe, but Xiaoguo cut him off. He had said he wouldn't sell a single thing to that group again. They had killed their own leader with their own hands, and yet, it seemed they would end up with absolutely nothing. However, Xiaoguo clarified that if they were no longer members of Battle Axe, the restriction wouldn't apply to them. A woman named Bai Lu, the logistics director of the Ark shelter, stepped forward. She saw an opportunity. On behalf of Ark, she officially invited them to join, while the Feng Chao group also welcomed any capable friends. The deputy's mind raced as he weighed his options. Finally, he agreed to join Ark, and the dozen men behind him dropped their weapons in a clear sign of submission. Xiaoguo leaned against the counter and gave a casual wave. The small mountain of 100 beef crates slid across the ground, coming to a steady halt right in front of the deputy. The deputy was quite clever and knew how the world worked. He walked up to Bai Lu and spoke with great respect. He offered the crates to her as a greeting gift for the Ark shelter. The Feng Chao people watched with envy, but they didn't dare interfere. This time, no one dared to voice any objections. Bai Lu took her place behind the tiled counter to finalize the arrangements. The lean man from the Feng Chao group quietly took his place in line behind Bai Lu. Xiaoguo asked what he needed. He requested compressed biscuits, water, and instant noodles. 2 heavy cases were promptly flipped open on the counter. Inside were 50 gold bars and 20 golden boxes. Once the transaction was complete, the man didn't seem in any hurry to leave. He asked if the shop accepted pre-orders. Xiaoguo confirmed that he did, asking what exactly the man was looking for. He wanted antibiotics and cold medicine, as much as possible. Xiaoguo told him to return with a list and a deposit. The man promised to bring everything next time. After that, it was the turn of the lean man and Bai Lu once again. In addition to the medicine, they pre-ordered cigarettes and alcohol. Once they finished, various individuals began trading their own small items. Some offered gold jewelry, while others brought small golden boxes. But then, one person stepped forward with something quite different. He produced a car battery to trade. As it turned out, the energy density of batteries in this world was surprisingly advanced. Their cycle life was nearly double that of his own world. Suddenly, Xiaoguo realized he had been looking at things all wrong. Up until now, he had treated this entire world as nothing more than a giant ATM for gold and golden boxes. He had completely ignored the advanced technology this world possessed before the great disaster struck. He turned around and brought out 2 loaves of bread, a bottle of mineral water, and 2 sausages. The surrounding survivors were absolutely stunned by the payment. Xiaoguo announced he would be accepting more batteries like this in the future. At the back of the crowd, several lone scavengers began to close in like a pack of wolves. The man clutched the heavy food to his chest. His body trembled violently. To him, this food didn't represent hope. It felt like a death sentence. But Xiaoguo had questions for him. He warned the crowd that if anyone moved, he wouldn't mind spending a few more crates of beef to buy their heads. The scavengers instantly froze in place, their bodies stiff with sudden fear. After all, the third-in-command of Battle Axe was still lying dead nearby. Xiaogua then asked the man for his name, Zhou Yuan. When asked where the battery came from, Zhou Yuan revealed it was from the Tianxiong Technology Park. Zhou Yuan explained that he was once a battery engineer at Tianxiong Technology, and this Thor 7-star model was their pride and joy. It was the company's flagship product. When the disaster first broke out, the timing couldn't have been more ironic. They had just finished producing a massive batch of orders, ready for shipment. There were at least tens of thousands of finished batteries sitting in the company warehouse, just waiting to be taken. However, the thousands of employees in the park had all turned into zombies. Xiaogua nodded, processing this information. He realized that if he used his gold to rebuild a production line, the Thor 7-star's performance would spark an energy revolution back home. Assuming the machinery is scrap, he asked if the complete technical data for the battery could still be recovered. He needed everything: the raw material formulas, the processing workflows, and the full manufacturing blueprints. Zhou Yuan confirmed that the park servers held the complete records. If he could reach a server, he could extract the data. At that moment, the way Xiaogua looked at the man changed completely. To be honest, he saw him in a whole new light. This wasn't just a destitute engineer anymore. He was a walking key to a literal treasure trove of technology. Xiaogua knew he would need local muscle for this. He looked at Zhou Yuan and made a decision on the spot. He told him that from now on, he worked for the shop. His task was to identify and evaluate every piece of tech that came through. In exchange, he would provide him with all the food and water he needed. A wave of uncontrollable joy washed over Zhou Yuan. It was the ultimate stroke of luck, a complete reversal of fortune in a world that rarely offered second chances. The other survivors were quick to catch on. If Zhou Yuan could change his life with one battery, why couldn't they? And so, a frantic gold rush of a different kind began among the survivors as they scrambled for scrap. They brought forward the motherboard of a military drone and a sealed biological sample cooler, hoping for a miracle. Someone even offered half of a burnt academic journal. Xiaogua accepted it all, handing everything to Zhou Yuan for appraisal. This feverish trading continued late into the night, until two blinding headlights suddenly tore through the darkness. Immediately after, the steady and powerful roar of an engine echoed as Bai Lu and Xue Shou's men arrived almost simultaneously. Several boxes of gold and golden cases were laid out on the ground, serving as the deposit for the Ark and Fengchao groups. With the deposit received, Xiaogua promised he would have their goods ready for the next scheduled transaction. Both Bai Lu and Xue Shou's men maintained a low, respectful posture, even though the official business was technically finished. Neither side showed any intention of leaving, as their gazes drifted toward Zhou Yuan and the pile of scrap on the ground. Xiaogua's gaze remained calm and steady as he mentioned the Tianxiong Technology Park located in the Feishu North District. He noted there were tens of thousands of finished Thor 7-star batteries there, though the place was swarming with 5,000 zombies. That number was enough to swallow anyone whole, but he offered them a rare chance to make a real fortune. He would provide the funding if they provided the manpower to clear the park and bring back the server mainframes intact. The leaders of Bai Lu and the WASP group began calculating rapidly, knowing the risks were hellish, to say the least. However, the rewards were heavenly, and more importantly, it was a chance to build a deep connection with this mysterious shopkeeper. The Fengchao group was the first to accept, claiming their slasher squad was ready for the challenge. They boasted the strongest individual assault capabilities in Feishu, though WASP was warned not to overpromise. The ARC group countered, claiming they possessed the top technical team in the region for hacking and transport. They insisted only they could ensure a flawless mission, but then the Panshur group stepped in to claim the task for themselves. Panshur claimed to have the most awakened members to guarantee the server's safety, which the others found laughable. Against 5,000 zombies, even awakened warriors would run out of stamina and die, as the man named Scorpion pointed out. He argued that brute force alone wouldn't solve this, and without their technicians, the others couldn't even get through the gates. It turned out that the chief electrical engineer of Tianxiong Technology was currently with their group, the Lighthouse. His name was Wang Chongming, and as it happened, no one understood the layout of that facility better than he did. As soon as those words were spoken, the expressions of Bai Lu, Wasp, and Scorpion changed instantly. The Lighthouse group actually held such a powerful trump card, but Xiaogua had heard enough. He told them he only cared about results, and if the servers were damaged or he didn't get what he wanted, none of them should ever expect to trade for even a single centimeter of supplies from him again. The faces of the four representatives turned deathly pale at his blunt and utterly ruthless ultimatum. Kong Yi of the Panshur group was the first to agree, and with that, the first alliance was formed. The other three major powers quickly followed suit, joining the top four factions of the ruins together. An unprecedented alliance was born, creating a formidable legion of nearly 100 awakened warriors. Supported by hundreds of elite soldiers, this army was ready as Xiaogua ordered Zhou Yuan to go with them. He warned them to bring him back without a single hair out of place, which they promised to do. However, Bai Lu pointed out a potential risk: the Zhan Mansion, whose third-in-command had died right here. The leader, Lei Bao, was a notorious manhunter who would certainly not let this matter rest. While Zhan Mansion was less powerful, any sabotage during a battle with thousands of zombies could be fatal. Once again, all eyes turned toward Xiaoguo to see how he would handle this looming threat. He calmly announced that one ordinary Zhan Mansion member would be worth 10 cases of beef. A small leader would fetch 100 cases, and for the head of Lei Bao himself, he offered 1,000. Whether it was these factions or any wanderer in the ruins, whoever brought the head would get the cans. The 4 leaders gasped, realizing that what Bai Lu called a risk was nothing to this man. A dead silence fell over the square as the weight of his wealth and ruthlessness sank in. Bai Lu and the others abandoned any lingering schemes, knowing they could easily be the next targets. The bounty was issued, and there was no room for further negotiation with Bai Lu, Wasp, Scorpion, and Kong Yi. These 4, who could shake the entire ruins with a single step, didn't waste another moment on idle chatter. They moved with incredible speed to assign tasks before leading their men to the vehicles and departing. Before leaving, Bai Lu made a point of approaching Zhou Yuan, politely asking him to accompany them. She explained that they would need more details about the technicians during the journey. To be honest, she was being quite thorough. She cast a deliberate glance toward Xiaoguo, and only after receiving his nod did she finally board the ARC vehicle. Once the door was closed, our protagonist didn't rush back to the other world just yet. Instead, he focused his mind. He pulled out all the energy crystals from the day's trades and, without a hint of hesitation, began consuming them. The familiar, agonizing pain surged through him once more as he waited for every last drop of energy to be absorbed. He snapped his eyes open, feeling his power evolve. Xiaoguo's dimensional warehouse had reached a new level. Its capacity now stood at 3,000 cubic meters, and a second ability had awakened, telekinetic control. He could now manipulate objects weighing up to 200 kilograms, and it was far more than just moving things around. We see him turn his gaze toward a metal shelf in the corner. This time, he didn't even need to lift a hand. With a single look, the heavy metal was instantly crushed and compressed into a high-density block. With 12 minutes remaining before his next dimensional jump, he decided it was finally time to return. The discovery of that Thor battery had been like a seed planted in his mind. It had grown into a vast forest of ambition that he could no longer ignore. He was no longer satisfied with being a simple merchant between worlds. In the safety of the modern world, he wanted more. He intended to build a commercial empire of his own, one that would change everything. And to do that, those hundreds of tons of gold needed to be converted into liquid capital as quickly as possible. But moving such a massive amount of gold through regular channels was absolutely impossible. A name soon surfaced in Xiaoguo's mind, Brother Biao, that local thug who dealt in the shadows. A man like that inevitably touched the city's gray underbelly, making him the most efficient bridge to cross. Once the funds were in place, the next step would be a frantic replenishment of supplies. He planned to completely fill his 3,000 cubic meter warehouse and his small shop. After that, he would register a tech company to finally set the framework in motion. His thoughts were incredibly clear as he prepared to receive the technical data from the Tianxiong technicians. Every step pointed toward that grand ambition, and by now, the dimensional jump was ready. With a single thought, the familiar weightlessness wrapped around him, and the jump was complete. He had returned to Earth, with the next jump's cooldown set at 11 hours. Outside the window were city lights and bustling traffic, a sharp contrast to the silent ruins of moments ago. It felt as though he were between 2 universes, a disparity that made him even more determined. He knew he had to hold onto this power tightly. Back on Earth, he didn't leave the shop immediately. Instead, he lay down on his bed. The surge in his mental strength had greatly reduced his need for sleep. Still, a few hours of rest would bring his body back to peak condition. When he finally opened his eyes, it was already 11 in the morning. After a quick lunch, he dialed Brother Biao's number. The man answered roughly, but his tone shifted instantly. Brother Guo, what are your orders? Xiaoguo explained he had goods to sell. Biao hesitated, asking if the items were legitimate. Xiaoguo admitted there was some risk, but not much. To be honest, that was a bit of an understatement. He told Biao to meet him alone at the old cement plant. Biao understood perfectly. Biao promised to be there on time, and soon enough, the clock struck 3 in the afternoon. We returned to that same old cement plant, but this time, Xiaoguo is the one sitting on the sofa as Biao arrives. The man barely dared to breathe in his presence. Guo, Brother Guo, he stammered. About the goods you wanted to move. Xiaoguo casually pulled a single gold bar from a burlap sack, and Biao's pupils constricted instantly. A 500-gram gold bar is valuable, certainly, but any large jewelry shop could handle a single piece. Just as Biao was thinking that, Xiaoguo pulled the sack open wider, revealing it was packed to the brim with gold. Biao froze where he stood, his mind going completely blank. It wasn't just one bar, it was a mountain of them. There were 20 bars in total, each weighing 500 grams, and Biao's body began to tremble uncontrollably. 10 kilograms of gold. To Biao, this looked like someone had just successfully robbed a central bank vault. Or perhaps hijacked an armored truck. He remembered Xiaoguo saying there wasn't much risk, which, naturally, was a massive lie. Touching something like this was like ordering a fast-track delivery to the executioner's block. This was a crime of the century. He hadn't even dared to dream of such a thing. Guo, Brother Guo, he choked out, you're asking for my life here. Xiaogua simply asked if he could handle it. Biao remained silent, wanting to say he didn't have the stomach for this. He couldn't even meet Xiaogua's eyes, having already decided that the man before him was a truly ruthless criminal. Xiaogua mocked him, asking how a supposed big-shot loan shark couldn't handle such a small amount of gold. Biao insisted he couldn't do it. Master Gua, a case this big, I really don't dare touch it, he pleaded. Xiaogua told him to relax, claiming the gold was clean and had no history. He was simply too lazy to sell it off slowly himself. He asked if Biao understood. Master Gua, can I make a phone call? Biao asked tentatively. He wanted to check with his contacts. Xiaogua waved him off, and Biao felt like he'd been granted a royal pardon. He didn't even dare walk away, putting the call on speakerphone instead. Hey Biao, what's up? A voice answered. Biao asked his contact if there had been any major gold-related crimes in the area recently. The person on the other end was a bit confused, but answered honestly that there were no such cases. With surveillance cameras on every street, nobody would dare touch that. Did you strike it rich and want to buy some? Having received his answer, Biao felt as if he'd taken a sedative and finally hung up the phone. He looked at Xiaogua, his gaze shifting. Master Gua, I definitely can't handle a shipment of this size alone. But he knew someone who could. Trembling slightly, Biao dialed another number for a woman named Su. What is it? She asked. Sister Su, it's Biao. I'm here with a gentleman who has some gold goods. He explained the man wanted to move a shipment. How big? She asked. Biao hesitated for a moment. 10 kilograms. And there's more later. This time, the silence on the other end was even heavier. Half an hour later, at the usual place, she would inspect the goods. And so, we see them arrive at a private club. Sister Su was a woman dressed in an elegant cheongsam. She gestured toward Xiaogua with a polite invitation. Xiaogua didn't stand on ceremony, walking over and taking a seat with complete confidence. He tossed the burlap sack onto the table. Sister Su didn't even pause her steady hand as she poured the tea. Only after pushing a cup toward him did she finally speak. How should I address you, friend? Xiaogua. She then asked if she could see the goods, and he nodded, opening the bag for her. 10 gold bars lay there silently. Sister Su's inspection was incredibly professional, lasting for quite some time. She muttered to herself that it was 999 pure gold, full weight, standard, large yellow croaker bars. Finally, she looked up. Mr. Gua, a shipment this large, where did it come from? Xiaogua simply picked up his teacup. He took a quiet sip of the tea. Mr. Gua, it's not that I don't trust you, she continued calmly. But this business has its rules. 10 kilograms is no small amount, so I must ask for clarity. As she spoke, she carefully watched his expression, but Xiaogua remained silent, merely glancing toward Biao. Biao understood the hint immediately and hurried out, leaving Xiaogua to pull a single gold bar from the bag. Under Sister Su's watchful gaze, he applied a bit of pressure, and the gold bar began to deform like modeling clay. A man with this kind of strength had no need to deal in stolen goods. She took a deep breath. She finally offered her price, 700 per gram. At that rate, 10 kilograms would be 7 million. He neither accepted nor refused, simply asking what her maximum capacity was. Sister Su's composure began to waver. This was a direct challenge to the limits of her entire distribution network, and she knew it. Mr. Gua, if the goods are all this clean, I can help you move 50 kilograms every month. That meant 35 million a month, but Xiaogua simply shook his head and slowly held up one finger. He wanted to move 100 kilograms. Sister Su's professional calm vanished instantly at the suggestion. Mr. Gua, are you joking? She asked. At current market rates, 100 kilograms was a staggering amount. We have to wonder if her network could even handle a cash flow approaching nearly $1 billion. To be honest, her operations simply couldn't sustain that. No private channel could digest that much in a month. Moving that much gold wasn't just about the money anymore. It was practically a declaration of war. Such massive capital movements would inevitably attract the kind of official attention that leads to serious trouble. He had considered this, of course. What if I don't need it all in cash? He asked calmly. You mean an asset exchange? She replied. He told her he needed an industrial park or a battery manufacturer. This was an unexpected turn. She hadn't imagined he was offloading gold to fund a lifestyle, but for something else. It turns out he was doing it for his experiments. Imagine a man who can crush gold with his bare hands. A terrifying existence capable of producing a ton of gold, who suddenly decides he wants to be an entrepreneur. This was no longer a simple trade. It was a massive capital operation on a scale she could hardly imagine. Mr. Lin, this matter has completely exceeded my authority. I need to report this to my superiors. He waved his hand dismissively as she made the call. Boss, it's Su Wan. I have a deal. A very big one. The goods are gold, very clean. As for the amount, she glanced at him. I currently have 300 kilograms. The other party could provide a ton every month, with 300 kilograms ready now. After the call ended, we see that Su Wan had shifted from being the leader of the trade to a mere messenger. Mr. Gua, she began. My boss wants to meet you in person, tomorrow night at 7, right here at this same location. He nodded and pointed toward the gold. Let's move these first, to show their sincerity regarding this batch. They offered 800 per gram. In less than 5 minutes, his account received 800,000. Once the transaction was complete, Su Wan personally saw him out until his van disappeared into the distance. After he left, Biao approached with a fawning smile. Sister Su, how is it? That Master Gua. From now on, do not ask a single word about anything regarding this Mr. Gua, she interrupted sharply. Do whatever he tells you. If something goes wrong, no one can protect you. Biao felt a sudden chill. He nodded repeatedly like a chicken pecking at grain. Instead of returning to the shop, he headed to the wholesale center. The salesperson from last time saw him and immediately came over to greet him. Boss Lin, what can I get you today? Take this list and multiply the quantity of every item by 10. The manager's hands trembled as he glanced at it. He promised everything would be arranged. After paying $2 million for the goods, he made trip after trip to the industrial park. He continued until the resource warehouse was mostly full, but he still had more important matters to attend to. In that broken world he visited, a single box of ordinary antibiotics was worth far more than gold. He drove to the city's pharmaceutical wholesale street, avoiding the flashy, high-end stores for his specific needs. Instead, he stepped into a small shop tucked away in an alley, where a middle-aged man looked him over with suspicion. Do you have procurement qualifications for a kitchen or a hospital? The man asked. No? Then I can't sell to you. However, Lin simply pulled out his phone and showed his balance, the long string of zeros reflecting in the man's eyes. Amoxicillin, tourniquets, gauze, iodine, saline. I want as much as you have, he stated firmly. The man's breathing stopped for a moment as he stared at the screen. What exactly do you plan to do with all this? You only need to tell me if you're selling, Lin replied. Finally, the man took a deep breath and lowered his voice. The warehouse is in the back. Follow me. Half an hour later, the van was packed with medicine after a $1 million payment. Next stop was the hardware city. I need 20 of this diesel generator model and all your solar charging panels. I'll take the matching batteries too. All of them. And the wrenches, pliers, and welding machines. Yes, don't unpack them. Just load the whole crates. Finally, he needed fuel, which couldn't be bought through regular channels. Fortunately, Biao had given him an address, a private oil depot hidden in the outskirts of the city. When the owner learned he wanted hundreds of barrels of gasoline and diesel, he nearly called Lin his own father on the spot. The millions he spent here would, in that other world, be returned to him 100 or even 1,000 times over. With only 30 minutes left on his dimensional travel cooldown, we see him decide to wait just a little longer. After all, it was currently night in the other world, and he wanted to time his arrival for the break of day. When morning finally arrived, he opened his eyes at exactly 6 o'clock, ready for the transition. The familiar feeling of weightlessness instantly enveloped his body. The dimensional leap was complete. He had returned to the Doomsday era. The cooldown for his next journey was set at 10 hours. The moment he opened the door, a group of scavengers swarmed forward. Boss, I have a battery here. Please take a look. In the man's hand was a Thor 7-star battery, a rare find in this desolate wasteland. In the next second, the battery vanished, replaced by bread and mineral water as the exchange continued. The survivors swarmed forward until 7 o'clock, when a slight tremor shook the ruins. The representatives of the 4 major powers stepped out of their vehicles, announcing they were ready. All technical personnel and equipment had been successfully deployed and were in position. Scouts from the Wind Tide faction had already departed to clear any obstacles along the route. The engineer, Wang Chongming, had officially confirmed the exact location of the servers. Have you all had breakfast yet? Lin asked, a sudden question that left the leaders momentarily stunned. Before they could answer, he waved his hand, and a mountain of instant noodles and canned food appeared. The 4 leaders stared, their throats tightening, as even for them, a full meal was a rare luxury. What are you waiting for? It's a gift from the boss. Go, one of them shouted to the men. That roar acted like a lit fuse, and in the next moment, everyone was lining up for food. The soldiers' eyes grew moist as they began shoveling the food into their mouths with desperate hunger. If the breakfast before the mission was this grand, they wondered what the final reward might be. Would there be meat at every meal? They pondered this while enjoying the most luxurious breakfast in the wasteland. Then, we see Lin make another move, dropping several large cardboard boxes onto the dusty ground. This time it wasn't food, but cigarettes, a currency in this world second only to energy cores. He ordered 2 packs for every soldier and a whole carton for each awakened, providing a true spiritual luxury. This gesture was more effective than any pre-battle speech, as he had not only filled their stomachs, but also soothed their weary souls. And just when they thought the gifts were over, he raised his hand again. This time, he brought forth several black cases marked with symbols of high-precision equipment. Professor G rushed forward and pried open one of the cases, revealing a row of sleek reconnaissance drones. The other boxes were filled with matching walkie-talkies, neatly organized and ready for use. With anti-interference tech, extended battery life, and thermal imaging, these tools changed everything. We see that with this tech, they could bypass 90% of the danger. Xiezi, Bailu, and Huangfeng gathered around. Their breathing grew heavy. In the past, they relied on Chiho risking his life to scout, while communication was mostly guesswork. This was a total game changer. Having eaten and drunk their fill, the mental state of the combat personnel had reached its absolute peak, to say the very least. Bailu and Wenyan quickly gave the order, and ARC Team 2 detached from the main group in their off-road vehicles. Soon, the roof-mounted machine guns began to fire, their dense rain of bullets instantly tearing the zombie swarm apart. The entire process was smooth and efficient. Meanwhile, we find Xiaomai Bewley leaning back on a folding bed, staring at a monitor that clearly displayed the live footage being transmitted back by the drones. At this moment, the armored convoy came to a halt just 1 kilometer away from the Tianxiong Science Park. The park resembled a small city, surrounded by continuous alloy walls standing 5 meters high. And every 100 meters, there stood a watchtower flickering with an ominous red warning light. The combat units quickly dispersed to set up local defenses, while Xiezi, Bailu, Huangfeng, and Professor Ji gathered together, staring solemnly at the screen. Bailu zoomed in on the gate structure to explain the situation. The main gate system was completely deadlocked and would require high explosives to blast it open. Hearing this, Xiezi's eyes turned fierce. He figured they might as well lure all the monsters out and crush them. It would certainly save them the trouble of searching for them one by one, a plan everyone agreed upon as Bailu began mapping it out. Using the gate as the center, they would construct a fan-shaped defensive position to hold the breach. The plan was simple: crush every monster that dared to rush out, while the lighthouse team handled the demolition. Feng Chao would take charge of security and cleanup, while the Pancher warriors held the front line of the operation. As the orders were given, the 4 major forces moved in unison, and the entire joint force began to operate like a precision war machine. We see the warriors from the Pancher stronghold constructing their first line of defense directly in front of the massive gate. They set up heavy machine guns aimed at the entrance, while ARC personnel quickly deployed directional mines. Several Earth-type Awakeners pressed their hands to the ground, which immediately let out a dull, vibrating roar. The hard ground began to churn and surge, and deep trenches started appearing out of thin air. A complex zone was formed, and before long, a crude but undeniably lethal fortification had taken shape. We watch as the demolition experts fix high-grade explosives to the alloy gate before quickly retreating to safety. A moment later, an ear-splitting explosion echoed through the air. In an instant, a massive, jagged breach appeared in the heavy alloy gate. For a few long seconds, the entire battlefield fell into a deathly, expectant silence. Suddenly, countless roars erupted from the gap as a dense, swarming mass of zombies began to pour out. They charged toward the defensive positions, and with a sharp command from Bailu, the order to fire was given. The heavy machine guns instantly spat fire, and the riflemen in the rear began their rapid-fire volleys. A dense rain of bullets tore the zombie swarm apart, yet the sheer number of monsters was staggering. Countless zombies climbed over the fallen piles of their own kind, reaching the trenches at the edge of the position in no time. In just 10 seconds, the trenches were filled with corpses, allowing more zombies to cross over the bridge of bodies. At that exact moment, the directional mines were triggered, and a massive explosion cleared a huge area. The space was emptied for a second, but a new black tide filled it instantly as Xiezi roared for his men to hold the line. Then, Xiezi personally grabbed a light machine gun and began spraying the zombie nest with a frantic barrage of fire. Behind him, the Pancher warriors held the line with grim determination, while the monitors showed a chaotic scene of flying flesh. Everything was proceeding according to plan, and he watched the unfolding carnage with a completely expressionless face. He raised his hand to maneuver a drone over the Science Institute, noting that the swarms inside were finally beginning to thin out. At that moment, Yang appeared at the corner of the street, leading a group of Awakeners behind her. The group stared at the well-stocked shelves inside the shop, their eyes filled with unmistakable greed and longing. Yang, however, remained perfectly composed as she looked him in the eye and got straight to the point. She mentioned hearing about the assault on the Institute and offered the services of her group to help. His gaze swept over the crowd before his lips curled into a playful, mocking smile at the mention of help. He noted that Bailu and Xiezi were already doing enough, which caused Yang's expression to shift as she took a deep breath. She insisted they could do anything the others could and do it better, which piqued his interest immediately. He pointed to the monitor and told her that if they wanted to prove it, the zombies rushing from that breach were theirs. As an advance payment, he offered each of them a single can of beef from Bailu's supplies. He challenged them to show him they were worthy of a seat at the table, leaving the Awakeners feeling insulted and angry. A chorus of complaints broke out, with many shouting that they weren't beggars willing to risk their lives for a single can of beef. Yang ignored the noise, keeping her eyes fixed on him as she told the group to shut up or leave immediately. She told those staying to follow her for their rations and get to work before turning to head toward the Science Institute. The Awakeners stood there in stunned silence until a scarred, burly man gritted his teeth and followed her lead. One by one, the rest of the group began to follow, and he watched the entire scene unfold with a calculating eye. A cold smile touched his lips. After all, he wasn't looking for mercenaries who only cared about the money. What he truly wanted was a force loyal to his strength alone, and not long after, Yang returned with a dozen Awakeners in tow. Bailu frowned slightly at the sight of them, but Yang wasted no time, stating clearly that she was acting on Bosqua's orders. She announced that the breach was now their responsibility, and hearing this, Bailu chose not to ask any further questions. He simply distributed a case of beef cans, which Yang and her group accepted with cold, expressionless faces. They turned and marched toward the zombie nest without hesitation, leaving Bailu to watch them with a deeply conflicted gaze. He couldn't understand why these drifters were being sent to the front, but he suppressed his doubts and issued new orders. He told everyone to conserve ammunition and shift their fire to the flanks, causing the roar of the guns to suddenly soften. This created a lethal gap in the defensive line, and we see countless zombies immediately beginning to swarm toward the opening. The scarred, burly man let out a beast-like roar as his body transformed into a massive, 7-foot-tall humanoid monster. He charged into the nest, crushing a dozen zombies instantly, which prompted the other Awakeners to finally unleash their own powers. For a moment, a dazzling array of abilities lit up the battlefield, but it wasn't long before a glaring problem began to emerge. The Awakeners were fighting as individuals with zero coordination. Their attacks were wild and effective, yet utterly chaotic. Their defense was full of holes, and every so often, a stray zombie would slip right past their disorganized line. The soldiers were forced to pick off the stragglers themselves, while Yang stood at the back, watching everything with a cold, detached eye. Only when the group showed signs of collapsing did she finally move, slowly raising her right hand toward the fray. A strange, beautiful fire lotus bloomed silently in her palm, radiating an aura of destruction that was honestly quite terrifying. She commanded them to fall back, and the Awakeners scrambled away just as she took a decisive step forward. With a gentle push, she sent the fire lotus drifting through the air until it landed softly in the very heart of the zombie nest. Upon impact, it erupted into a massive firestorm, completely swallowing everything within dozens of meters in a roar of heat. Hundreds of zombies were reduced to ash in the blink of an eye, and a moment later, the flames finally began to fade. Everyone stood frozen in place, utterly stunned by the display, while back at the monitors, we see you leaning back with a faint smile. It seemed Yang was quite interesting, strong and clear-headed, while the others, to be perfectly honest, were little more than a disorganized mob. As you watched and reflected, you noticed that the stream of zombies surging from the breach was finally beginning to thin out. The nest was nearly empty, a fact that Bai Lu and his men quickly realized, causing morale across the battlefield to soar instantly. Under a fresh barrage of concentrated fire, the nest was completely cut off, and Bai Lu's voice soon rang out across the entire position. He ordered all units to advance in a cautious scout formation, entering the park to take control of the central plaza. The roar of engines filled the air once more as the steel torrent of vehicles moved rapidly into the high-tech industrial park. Inside, the roads branched out in every direction, lined with sleek buildings that radiated a distinct sense of advanced technology. Not long after, Professor G successfully hacked into the local area network, projecting a glowing 3D map into the air before them. Bailu moved quickly to divide the map into 4 distinct sectors, knowing that splitting up was the only way to maximize their efficiency. Pancher was tasked with clearing the eastern district, while Zhou Yuan went along to check if the production lines were still intact. Feng Chao took charge of clearing the perimeter and rooftops, leaving Fang Zhou to handle the administrative building in the west. After that, Yu and Wang Chongming took the elevator down to the 3rd basement level, where the doors eventually slid open in silence. At the very end of the basement corridor stood a massive blast door, and seeing it, Wang Chongming hurried forward without a word. He entered a long string of passcodes into the control panel, and a satisfying click echoed through the quiet hallway. The heavy mechanical locking pins began to shift, and slowly, the formidable blast door started to groan open. A wave of cold air immediately rushed out to meet them, revealing rows of black server cabinets standing in perfect, silent alignment. Countless indicator lights flickered in the darkness, and the group moved inside quickly to begin their search for the main server. It wasn't long before Wang Chongming called out in excitement that he had found it, prompting Professor G to hurry over to his side. At the same time, the technicians fanned out to connect their storage devices, and the data transfer finally began to crawl across the screens. We see the green progress bars on the computer screens advancing slowly, while Professor G speaks into the communicator to update Bosqua. Calling Bosqua, the lighthouse has arrived at the target location, he reports with a steady voice. The data backup is expected to take 40 minutes. Meanwhile, over in the giant production workshop of the Eastern District, the zombies have already been cleared out by the combat squad, and Zhou Yuan stands before a massive piece of manufacturing equipment. His fingers fly across the control panel with practiced ease, and soon enough, the indicator light atop the machine shifts from red to green. Seeing this, Zhou Yuan shouts out in excitement that the main structure of this production line is still perfectly intact. He notes that they only need to replace a few worn parts and connect a power source to get it running again. Xiezi listens before asking where the battery sector Bosqua wanted is, prompting Zhou Yuan to point toward the back of the workshop. There, the warehouse doors remain tightly shut until the Pancher soldiers step forward and use crowbars to force them open. As the doors give way to reveal countless shelves inside the warehouse, the entire group stands frozen in place. The shelves are neatly packed with brand new cardboard boxes, each one clearly printed with a specific logo. It is the unmistakable mark of the Thor Type 7. A soldier steps forward to slice a box open, and a second later, Over a dozen pristine batteries tumble out, causing the Panshir soldiers to erupt into cheers of pure joy. Zhou Yuan moves excitedly through the aisles of shelving, using his tablet to scan the inventory codes as he goes. He estimates there are at least 30,000 batteries here, a staggering find, to be perfectly honest. Furthermore, the storage conditions were excellent, meaning the damage rate likely doesn't even exceed 5%. Hearing this, Xiezi cannot suppress his wild delight, imagining that the canned food rewards from Bosqua will probably be piled as high as a mountain. Just then, Zhou Yuan's voice rings out again, announcing there is more than one production line. There are actually 2 complete production lines here, and at those words, Xiezi lets out a deafening, boisterous laugh. He grabs his walkie-talkie immediately to report to Bosqua that 30,000 intact batteries have been discovered in the eastern warehouse. With 2 complete production lines secured, we find Bosqua still leaning back comfortably on his folding bed. The communicator crackles repeatedly with reports of victory. Feng Chao has secured all high ground with no major enemy sightings. The northern dormitories have been cleared, yet his expression remains unchanged as he simply uses his telekinesis to pull a can of cola from a shelf and enjoy a drink. Soon, the data backup is finally complete. With the batteries packed and ready, the 4 teams reconvene in front of the main gate. At this moment, Xiezi begins to feel a nagging sense of unease, wondering if Bosqua will actually agree to a victory banquet or if he might even be angered by the suggestion, a thought that sends a chill down Xiezi's spine. Not long after, the main force returns to Bosqua and a strange, heavy silence falls over the area. Every eye is fixed on the tightly closed rolling shutter door, waiting for a sign. Xiezi, you mentioned wanting to hold a celebration, didn't you? At those words, Xiezi's heart sinks to the very bottom. Fine beads of sweat break out on his forehead as he stammers that it was his own impulsive idea, but Bosqua suddenly cuts him off. It's a good idea, he says, and then he simply raises his hand with a casual wave. In an instant, a mountain of meat appears in the center of the square: pork, beef, chicken, and duck, everything one could imagine. This is followed by countless vegetables and potatoes appearing out of thin air, along with hundreds of cases of ice-cold beer. The square is suddenly filled with the sound of men gulping in disbelief until Bosqua's voice rings out once more. What are you all standing there for? As the words fall, the entire crowd seems to freeze for a brief second. Then, a deafening cheer shatters the sky as the soldiers, unable to restrain themselves, rush toward that mountain of meat. A moment later, the Panshir soldiers set up grills and light the charcoal, while the Ark people begin washing the vegetables. The scouts from Fengchao fan out into the surrounding area, taking on the responsibility of guarding this grand feast. 10 minutes later, the rich aroma of roasting meat fills the square as everyone enjoys their meal and cold beer. For a moment, it feels as if the world has returned to the time before the catastrophe, while Ying stands on the outskirts of the crowd. He looks at Bosqua, who is watching the scene with a calm gaze, and suddenly realizes this isn't an insult. It isn't charity either, but a choice, to remain a lone wolf fighting for cold scraps in the ruins, or to submit to the king and enjoy the feast he provides. Meanwhile, Bosqua simply leans against the doorframe, sipping his cola. Suddenly, Xiezi runs over, his face flushed with excitement, and gives a solemn, deep bow to Bosqua. He declares that from now on, Panshir will be his most loyal ally, and his own life belongs to the boss. Bosqua says nothing. He merely crushes the empty cola can in his hand and tosses it into a trash bin 10 meters away. Then, he speaks indifferently, telling them that as long as they are obedient, there will be meat to eat at every meal. After that, he turns and disappears back into the shadows of the small shop. Those words act like a shot of adrenaline to everyone present, fueling their spirits. Even in his absence, Bosqua's presence seems to loom over the entire square. As the revelry continues, Bai Lu, Huang Feng, and Professor Ji gather around a simple table. They know the truth. From this day forward, the rules of the wasteland have changed. Much later, as the charcoal fires begin to fade, and the mountain of meat has been completely polished off, the rolling shutter door rises silently, and Bosqua emerges once more. Every eye in the square focuses on him instantly, but he simply raises a hand with a casual wave. In an instant, another mountain of supplies appears out of thin air in the center of the square. There are crates of compressed biscuits and bags of rice piled high for everyone to see. Beside them sit countless neatly stacked cans of luncheon meat and cartons of cigarettes. Here, we see 2 sets of supplies. One set is the agreed-upon payment for the 4 major powers, while the other is for every individual who fought. They are to collect them based on their combat merits, with Bai Lu handling the distribution and Xiezi assisting by her side. After speaking, Bosqua turns and retreats back into the small shop, while the square erupts once more into earth-shattering cheers. We see Bai Lu step forward to organize the distribution based on combat records, and the entire process is surprisingly orderly. At this moment, everyone understands that the old era has ended. From now on, these ruins can only have one rule. And that, naturally, is Bosqua's rule. Soon enough, the distribution of supplies is complete. One by one, the convoys start their engines and drive away from the square. Not long after, The square is left with nothing but a mess of picked-over bones and empty wine bottles. Yi Ying and the awakened stand alone in the center of the square, knowing deep down that their path is now clear. He is their only real choice. Seeing them waiting, Bosqua gives a casual wave of his hand. Instantly, dozens of boxes of instant noodles and canned goods appear out of thin air as their payment, and he tells them they can go. As the words fall, a man with a scarred face suddenly roars, asking if they are being treated like disposable rags. He complains that a single meal is all they get, and the crowd behind him grows restless, yet Yi Ying remains perfectly still. She takes 2 steps forward and looks Bosqua directly in the eye, stating that they wish to stay and work for him. She points out that the science park is currently empty, and it won't be long before the scavengers in the ruins take notice. Without anyone to guard the equipment and supplies, the entire place would be stripped bare within a single day. The 4 major powers have gone back to recover, and it is impossible for them to return in such a short time. She argues that they are the only ones who can head to the park immediately, leaving the awakened behind her in thoughtful silence. They exchange glances as a faint smile plays on Bosqua's lips, and he finally speaks with a calm indifference. He tells them that if they stay, they will no longer be free agents, but will become his first direct action team. Their code name will be Nightingale, with Yi Ying as their captain, his voice carrying a finality that brooks no argument. As his words settle, Yi Ying gives a gentle nod of agreement, and seeing this, Bosqua raises his hand once more. The next second, a brand new diesel generator thuds onto the ground, followed by several barrels of fuel. Immediately after, a small reconnaissance drone and its control tablet appear out of thin air. Finally, a dozen military-grade walkie-talkies are added to the pile as their new equipment. Bosqua tells them to take their pay and gear to the science park and establish a base. He demands a report even if a single mouse slips inside, leaving the group staring at the gear in disbelief. Even Yi Ying feels a flicker of excitement she can't quite suppress as she turns to her companions and barks an order. She tells everyone to check the supplies and prepare to move out, and this time, the response is a unified roar. With a chorus of "Yes, Captain," the team begins loading the supplies with newfound purpose. As their vehicles speed off toward the science park, Bosqua turns away and slowly pulls down the rolling shutter. Silence returns to the small shop, where he stares intently at a complex industrial design on his computer screen. Looking at the technical data for the Thor 7 battery production line, a faint smile plays on his lips. His plan is to return to the real world and use the gold in his warehouse as startup capital. By using high-energy batteries as a foundation, he intends to build a business empire that is truly his own. Word of the recent events spreads through the wasteland like wildfire, and soon, crowds begin flocking to the square. Before long, a massive, dark sea of people is gathered, and Bosqua finally steps out to meet them. However, he brings no food with him, only a cold reminder of the rules he has established. He tells them they must trade items of value for the right to survive, a harsh reality, but a fair one. To manage the chaos, he appoints a man to act as a temporary supervisor for the exchange. And just like that, a crude but highly efficient marketplace begins to hum with activity. While the survivors line up to trade for their lives, Bosqua simply sits back inside his shop, watching it all unfold. As he sweeps this old-world junk into his dimensional warehouse, the minutes and seconds begin to tick away. The cooldown for his dimensional travel is finally complete, and we see him look out at the ever-growing line in the square. The queue now stretches back hundreds of meters, and seeing this, he turns to give a final instruction to the temporary supervisor. He declares that trading will end promptly at 5 o'clock, a statement that makes the supervisor visibly stiffen with focus. The man then uses every ounce of his strength to shout to the crowd that Bosqua's trading window closes at 5 sharp. Anyone who misses their turn is told to come back early tomorrow, and Bosqua nods, satisfied that this supervisor is quite a talent. After that, he picks up his walkie-talkie and calls Yi Ying, telling her to send 2 of her people over. He orders them to bring the supervisor to the science park for housing once trade ends, leaving the man trembling with pure excitement. The supervisor immediately turns to bow 3 times toward the shop, while Bosqua simply returns his full attention to the computer. He reviews the technical data one more time with meticulous care, and just like that, the clock strikes 5 and trading concludes. The 2 team members sent by Yi Ying arrive to take over, and the survivors disperse quietly as no one dares to cause trouble. The square soon returns to a heavy silence, and with a single thought, we see the air around him begin to twist and warp. A blurry vortex instantly manifests before his eyes, and in the blink of an eye, he has returned to the real world. At this moment, there are only 2 hours left before his scheduled meeting with Su Wan's mysterious boss. He heads straight to the most high-end shopping mall in the city center and walks directly into a top-tier men's boutique. Half an hour later, he emerges wearing a custom-tailored, deep gray suit that fits him perfectly. He no longer looks like a wasteland shopkeeper, but a man of true authority as he arrives at the Jingshin Tea House at 7 o'clock. A white box van pulls up to the main entrance, and we see him step down calmly from the driver's seat. Su Wan is there to greet him personally at the door, but he ignores her for a moment, walking instead to the back of the van. He pulls two heavy metal cases from the rear compartment, their corners straining visibly under the immense weight they carry. The metal handles deform slightly under the pressure, and seeing this, Suwon's pupils contract in sudden shock. 300 kilograms of gold, split into two cases. Each one weighs a staggering 150 kilograms, yet he carries them effortlessly, one in each hand. Suwon takes a deep, steadying breath. She forces herself to suppress her growing alarm, stepping aside with a graceful gesture to lead the way. Her boss, it seems, is waiting. As she leads him through the main gates, we see him sense a cold, predatory presence lurking in the shadows of the courtyard. It feels like a nest of hidden vipers watching his every move. Soon, Suwon brings him deep into the main building to a private study. Inside, we find a room filled with floor-to-ceiling bookshelves and a mahogany desk, where an elderly man sits quietly behind the wood. He is holding an ancient, thread-bound book, seemingly lost in its pages. Suwon bows deeply toward him, her respect quite evident. She announces that Elder Tang and Mr. Gua have arrived. Elder Tang closes his book at those words and finally shifts his gaze toward him. He returns the old man's gaze with a calm of his own, before stepping forward to place the two heavy cases heavily onto the mahogany desk. The entire desk lets out a resounding thud under the weight. He simply tells them it's 300 kilograms of cargo, ready for inspection. Elder Tang's eyebrows twitch with interest. He doesn't touch the cases himself, but instead slowly picks up the internal telephone on his desk. A moment later, there is a knock at the door, and a middle-aged man wearing gold-rimmed glasses enters the study with practiced efficiency. The man carries precision testing equipment in his hands, and without a word, he reaches out to flip open the lids of the cases. Rows of gold bars sit neatly stacked inside, and the man begins to pull them out one by one, weighing and testing each piece meticulously. The inspection is finished quickly. The man reports to Elder Tang that there are 600 bars in total, weighing exactly 300 kilograms. The purity is perfect. Elder Tang gives a dismissive wave, and seeing the signal, the middle-aged man and Suwon both exit the room. Elder Tang interlaces his fingers on the desk, stating that he can offer 246 million for this specific batch of gold. He mentions that Suwon told him about the interest in a battery company, and with that, he slides a tablet across the desk. The screen displays detailed profiles for 3 different companies, but he doesn't even glance at them before giving his answer. In the very next second, Elder Tang's pupils contract in sudden, genuine astonishment at what he hears. It is clear that all he needs is a legal shell company. Elder Tang says no more, simply picking up the phone. He instructs the legal department to prepare the equity transfer for Yuanxing Technology and tells finance to form a project team. They are to process the gold through the cleanest channels possible. As he hangs up, the various departments spring into action. In less than an hour, the contract is delivered. He takes the pen and signs his name without a second thought. Elder Tang is stunned by this. He hadn't expected him to sign so boldly without even scrutinizing the specific terms. However, he looks at Elder Tang with eyes that are perfectly calm. Now, he is the owner of this company. He demands a complete list of every employee at Yuanxing Technology, including their specific positions and current salaries. He also wants their full performance records. Furthermore, he orders that all company accounts be frozen immediately. All physical assets are to be sealed. Nothing is permitted to leave the company premises without his express command. Finally, he orders everyone to be notified of a general meeting at the suburban factory tomorrow morning at 9. Anyone late or absent will be considered resigned. Elder Tang agrees to have his people handle the arrangements as requested. The purchase price for Yuanxing Technology is 180 million. He asks how the remaining gold should be handled. At this, he gives his instructions. He needs 5 million in cash and asks Elder Tang to keep the rest safe for now. Once internal affairs are settled, the balance can be transferred to the company account. Elder Tang watches him with a meaningful smile. He finds the young man increasingly unfathomable. Before long, Suwon returns to the study pushing a small trolley. 2 black cases sit upon the cart. She informs Mr. Gua that this is the 5 million in cash he requested. He nods at the news and stands up, giving Elder Tang a slight, respectful gesture of his hand. Then, he picks up the cases and turns to leave the study. A short while later, he emerges at the main gate. He tosses the 2 cases onto the passenger seat, starts the truck, and slowly drives away into the distance. Back in the study, Suwon turns to Elder Tang and asks if they truly intend to cooperate so deeply with Mr. Gua. His origins are far too mysterious, and his methods are almost ruthlessly cold. According to the records we have, his life history was utterly unremarkable, yet in just a few days, he has suddenly acquired unimaginable wealth. Elder Tang listens before slowly turning around, his expression remaining perfectly calm as he speaks. He orders that every single piece of information they gathered be destroyed immediately, leaving nothing behind. Furthermore, he forbids anyone from investigating Mr. Gua ever again, promising severe punishment for those who disobey. He adds that whatever Mr. Gua needs must be provided regardless of the cost, leaving Suwon visibly startled. She simply replies that she understands. On the following morning, at precisely 8:45, hundreds of employees have gathered at the Yuanxing Technology Factory workshop, whispering anxiously amongst themselves. Every face is a mask of unease and speculation, and it is at this exact moment that things change. The roar of an engine echoes from the distance, and suddenly, every eye in the room turns toward the workshop gates. Mr. Guo walks steadily into the crowd holding a folder, and under his sharp gaze, the chatter stops instantly. He opens the folder in his hands and, without any preamble, calls for the director of Yuanxing Technology. He gives the man exactly 10 minutes to pack his personal belongings and leave. The entire workshop seems to freeze. The director's face flushes with sudden rage as he shouts, asking who this man thinks he is to kick him out. Just then, the chief engineer steps forward to plead their case, arguing that while they haven't commercialized yet, they have made breakthroughs in materials and design, needing only a little more time and funding to succeed. To everyone's surprise, Mr. Guo cuts him off. He notes that the project has already dragged on for 3 years. It has drained 78 million in research funds and government subsidies, which is quite a staggering sum. The battery samples don't even meet half the market standard, and the safety rating shows a severe risk of thermal runaway. He tells the man his technology is worthless, leaving the engineer trembling as he stammers that Mr. Guo understands nothing. The director shouts that he is destroying Yuanxing, but Mr. Guo coldly replies that the company would only truly be destroyed in their hands. He declares that he will lead Yuanxing to a new life, completely overturning the entire battery industry in the process. As these words land, everyone looks at one another, and a sense of doubt and unease begins to brew among the crowd. Mr. Guo continues by calling out several executives by name, listing their specific evidence of embezzlement one by one. It becomes clear to everyone that he isn't here to negotiate, but to settle accounts. He finally reads the last name and the accompanying crimes. The executive team's arrogance vanishes instantly, replaced by the heavy threat of prison time hanging over each of their heads. Even the director's face loses every trace of color. However, things are far from over as Mr. Guo continues calling out names. His voice cuts through the room like a cold scythe, moving from the production line to the warehouse and even the logistics team. Every person named has been lazy or negligent, and now they are faced with the undeniable records of their own failures. Unable to offer a single word of defense, they can only walk out the gates in shame under the contemptuous glares of their colleagues. 10 minutes later, the workforce has shrunk by nearly a fifth, leaving the remaining employees trembling in the sudden silence. An unprecedented tension fills the air. It is then that Mr. Guo closes his folder and, under everyone's watchful eyes, retrieves a suitcase from his vehicle. He tosses the heavy case right into the center of the workshop floor. He opens the suitcase in front of the crowd, revealing stacks upon stacks of neatly arranged red banknotes. 5 million in cash is displayed there without any cover, as he calmly explains that this money is for them. He notes that the amount those people embezzled was far more than this. From today on, those who stay will see a change. Salaries will be increased by 50%, and all the back pay owed by the previous board will be settled. Everything will be paid before work resumes. He tells them to line up now, as each person will receive a 10,000 yuan bonus. The workshop falls into a brief, stunned silence before erupting into a roar of cheers that sounds like a volcano, which is understandable, really. In an instant, all previous anxiety and suspicion are burned away, and a long line quickly begins to form. As the workers move forward, each person bows deeply to Mr. Guo after receiving their money, but then, a discordant voice breaks the harmony. Suddenly, Sun Lei, an assistant engineer from the R&D department, speaks up calmly, introducing himself as a former member of the materials testing team. He notes that with the senior management now gone, the company's technical leadership has effectively vanished into thin air. A heavy silence falls over the workshop as everyone realizes that a company without a production goal simply cannot function. They all understand that unemployment is still a very real threat, and so, every eye in the room locks onto Mr. Guo. He doesn't offer a long-winded speech. Instead, he simply pulls out the Thor No. 7 battery, presenting it as the ultimate answer. He announces that from this day forward, Yuanxing Technology will produce only this product, which he renames the Yuanxing 1. A moment later, Sun Lei and several technicians crowd around, their eyes filled with a mix of curiosity and skepticism as they ask if it's a prototype. Sun Lei asks for the core parameters, and Mr. Guo calmly states the energy density is 400 watt-hours per kilogram. He adds that it has a cycle life of 5,500 charges, a statement that makes the very air in the room seem to freeze. The technicians present all gasp in unison, and Sun Lei nearly shouts that such a thing is absolutely impossible. These figures defied the laws of physics, especially when compared to the world's most advanced experimental samples. Faced with this tidal wave of doubt, Mr. Guo remains unfazed. In fact, this reaction was exactly what he was looking for. He asks if there is testing equipment in the workshop, challenging them to use their most professional tools and strictest standards. He tells them to verify for themselves whether he is telling the truth, leaving Sun Lei completely stunned where he stands. The engineer hadn't expected such absolute confidence, and after a moment, he calls out for the entire technical department to follow him. He tells the quality control team to join them as he steps forward, moving with a sudden, focused intensity. He takes the battery from Mr. Gua's hand as if it were a sacred relic and leads a frantic dash toward the second-floor laboratory. Half an hour later, the testing is complete, and Sun Lei comes charging back down like a madman, his hands trembling as he holds the reports. He announces to the breathless crowd that the results are in. The energy density is actually 401.7 watt-hours per kilogram. He reports that under high-stress charging tests, the capacity decay was a mere 0.3%, passing every safety check with flying colors. As his voice trails off, the entire crowd stands frozen in place, staring at the small metal block before them as if it had transformed. To them, it was no longer just a battery, but a mountain of gold, and Sun Lei could no longer suppress the waves of shock crashing through him. He walks up to Mr. Gua and bows deeply, declaring that from this day forward, the team will follow his lead without question. Mr. Gua simply turns to the staff by the money crates, instructing them to finish the payments and registration and to have everyone back by 9 tomorrow. With those final orders, he turns and departs, leaving under the feverish gaze of hundreds of newly inspired employees. As his truck pulls away, we see him pick up his phone to call Suwa, telling him there are several urgent matters to attend to. He instructs Suwa to take the technical data he's sending and, using the name of Yuanxing Technology, apply for patent protection at top speed. Every technical detail is to be classified as a top secret, and he also requests the hiring of a world-class professional manager to run operations. Furthermore, he wants a team of the country's most elite battery industry experts recruited immediately to bolster their ranks. Finally, he asks Suwa to organize a press conference for 3 days from now, a request that causes Suwa's gaze to sharpen with intensity. Suwa is clearly stunned by the sheer speed and decisiveness of Mr. Gua's actions, but he simply replies that he will get it done quickly. After the call ends, we find Suwa in the study, repeating every single one of Mr. Gua's requirements to Old Tang without missing a word. Old Tang's expression shifts into one of visible emotion as he listens, finally giving the order to do exactly as the young man requested. He commands his team to use every connection and resource available to cooperate regardless of the cost, eager to see what surprise awaits in 3 days. Almost instantly, the vast machinery of Old Tang's influence begins to turn with frantic energy, and within half an hour, the wheels are in motion. The most prestigious patent firms receive the encrypted data, while 3 top-tier headhunting agencies are handed the same urgent commission. Simultaneously, a wave of reports begins to dominate the tech headlines, pushing the name of Yuanxing Technology into the center of a brewing storm. Meanwhile, our protagonist finishes restocking his supplies as usual and prepares to cross back over into the apocalyptic world. Once there, he contacts the leaders of Panshur and Ark, instructing them to bring their energy cells and gold for the next trade. Simultaneously, he sends teams to the Tianqiong Tech Park to transport batteries and carefully dismantle the entire production line. Next, we see him call for Yiying, first distributing a fresh batch of supplies to the man and his group. He then arranges for Yiying to meet with representatives from the 4 major factions, knowing full well that Yiying's team alone cannot succeed. They simply cannot guard the entire tech park, so he instructs Yiying to begin recruiting more awakened survivors. His plan is to increase the number of awakened to 100, noting that the cooldown for his world-crossing ability has shifted again. As he expected, it has dropped to 9 hours, steadily approaching his ultimate goal of unlimited, instantaneous travel. This time, he remains in the wasteland for over 10 hours, as the local survivors have brought a massive haul of goods for trade. By the time the transaction is complete, he has secured over 200 kilograms of gold and 30 golden boxes. He stows the gold away in his dimensional warehouse, while choosing to absorb the energy from the golden boxes immediately. A moment later, his abilities are enhanced once more, expanding the dimensional warehouse capacity to a staggering 4,000 cubic meters. His telekinesis is also strengthened, now capable of lifting heavy objects weighing up to 300 kilograms with ease. Furthermore, he can now compress and accelerate metal with even greater force. Having finished his tasks, he returns to the real world. After a long, peaceful night of sleep, he waits until the following day to head over to the offices of Yuanxing Technology. The factory grounds are livelier than ever before, with employees wearing smiles they can't quite seem to suppress. Every few minutes, a fresh wave of cheers erupts from the laboratory, fueled by the sheer disbelief at the battery's performance. Meanwhile, he sits in his office having just hung up with Suwa, who is currently rushing over with the elite talent he requested. An hour later, there is a knock at the office door, and a woman with short, sharp hair steps inside the room. This is Jiang Yi, with Suwa following closely behind her. Before he can even speak, Jiang Yi notes that her time is precious. She suggests they skip the pleasantries, mentioning that the headhunters claim he is preparing to launch a product that will redefine the era. She asks if he expects to do that with this nearly bankrupt company, to which he simply replies that he has what no one else can offer. Jiang Yi lets out a cold laugh, skeptical of his claim that this product could force every battery manufacturer in the world to close their doors. She tells him that in her 10 years of experience, she has seen far too many young men dreaming of overturning the entire world. Without exception, she notes, they all became industry jokes. She only came here to confirm one specific thing. She wants to know how he is any different from the rest, a challenge that only makes him smile as he stands and walks toward the door. He simply tells her to follow him. Jiang hesitates for a moment, looking slightly stunned, before quickly catching up. Suwa follows at a quick pace as well, and soon we see the group arrive at the quality control laboratory on the second floor. He instructs Sun Lei to bring the quality inspection report, which Jiang takes and begins to scan with a critical eye. A few seconds later, her eyes are full of disdain as she remarks that forging data is supposed to be a professional skill. She claims the data in this report is full of holes, causing Sun Lei's face to turn bright red as he tries to defend their work. Sun Lei insists they measured every data point personally, but Jiang merely glances around at the equipment in the lab. With a contemptuous smirk, she asks if they really expect to get results using these 20-year-old antiques. Even now, his face remains perfectly calm and devoid of emotion as he asks her exactly how she would like to test it. Jiang pulls a USB drive from her bag, explaining that it contains a testing suite she developed herself in the past. It is a high-standard battery detection protocol, 5 times more rigorous than the national standard, which is quite extreme, to be honest. She demands that their battery undergo every test again using her methods, with her own people operating the machinery. Furthermore, she insists the testing must happen at an internationally certified third-party facility. He agrees without a second thought. He asks Suwa to contact Old Tang immediately, as he intends to borrow the laboratory at CAS testing right this moment. Jiang stands there frozen, completely caught off guard by how readily he agreed to her demands. Not only did he agree, but he is aiming for the top laboratory in the field. Meanwhile, Suwa is already dialing the phone. Less than 10 minutes later, Suwa walks back to his side and confirms that Mr. Gu has already made the necessary arrangements. The laboratory will be open to us for the next 24 hours, and upon hearing this, he picks up the Yuanxing 1 from the table. He leads the group out, and not long after, we see them arrive at the CAS testing center where Jiang and her team are waiting. They enter the core laboratory directly, and she wastes no time plugging her USB drive into the main computer. After placing the Yuanxing 1 battery into the testing chamber, Jiang gives the command for the process to begin. The evaluation officially starts, and one by one, a series of tests that could only be described as brutal are executed in sequence. For a moment, the entire laboratory falls silent except for the hum of the machines. Everyone present holds their breath in anticipation. As the minutes tick by, Jiang and her team find themselves growing increasingly shocked by what they are witnessing. The Yuanxing 1 performs perfectly under every single test, even as the final trial, a steel needle piercing the battery, is completed. The data on the screen remains as stable as it was at the start, and a heavy silence descends upon the entire laboratory. Jiang stares at the flawless test report for a long time before finally whispering 3 words, a new era. We see her slowly turn toward him and announce that she is in, though she admits she still has one lingering question. She wonders if such a product can truly be mass-produced, and more importantly, what the actual cost would be. This is her final spark of logic as a professional manager, but he doesn't offer a verbal answer just yet. Instead, he pulls another USB drive from his pocket and hands it to her, explaining it contains the full production process for the Yuanxing 1. It includes the entire plan for the production line transformation, and he tells her that her mission is to move with absolute speed. Her task is to modify the production line so it is capable of mass-producing this battery as soon as possible. Upon hearing this, Jiang Yi's mind goes blank. Her hand trembles slightly as she reaches out to take the drive. Deep down, she knows that what she holds is far more than just digital data or simple schematics. It is a secret capable of overturning the global industrial landscape, and suddenly, the look in her eyes turns to one of pure determination. She declares that she understands, appointing Sun Lei as Chief Technology Officer before ordering everyone to return to the company immediately. She tells her team they have 2 days to etch these blueprints into their brains, but then Jiang pauses as a sudden thought occurs to her. She looks at him with a slight frown, noting that even with the materials, transforming the production line will take at least a month. She wonders what they will show the media at the press conference the day after tomorrow, but he simply promises to handle the core components himself. He instructs them to send him a list of the necessary parts, promising to bring everything back by tomorrow at the latest. Their only job is to ensure the production line is operational and produces the first finished battery before the press conference begins. With that, he walks out of the laboratory, and the rest of the team immediately springs into action to follow his lead. Half an hour later, inside the Yuanxing Technology office, Sun Lei hands him a detailed list of the required materials. He takes the list, gives it a casual glance, and stuffs it into his pocket while telling them to wait for his news. He leaves after dropping that single sentence, and not long after, we see him return to the familiar surroundings of his small shop. Immediately, he activates his ability to travel back to the apocalypse, where he pulls out his walkie-talkie to start calling for backup. In less than 20 minutes, 3 off-road vehicles come to a halt right in front of the shop's entrance. Bai Lu steps out of the car accompanied by Zhou Yuan and Wang Chongming, announcing that she has brought the people he requested. He gives Bai Lu a nod and hands over the list, ordering them to head to the technology park and bring these items back. He emphasizes that every item on the list must be accounted for, even if they have to dismantle entire production lines to get them. The sheer scale of the request makes Zhou Yuan and Wang Chongming's hearts skip a beat, but they quickly promise to complete the mission. A moment later, the convoy sets off, speeding away in the direction of the technology park to fulfill his demands. Meanwhile, he switches his walkie-talkie to the public channel and announces that it is time for trading to begin. He tells them to bring their gold to exchange for supplies, and as soon as he finishes, responses from various factions start flooding in. The Hanshi Stronghold, the Hive, the Lighthouse, and the Ark all check in one after another to confirm they are ready. At this point, he switches back to an encrypted channel to ask Yi Ying about the progress of their recruitment efforts. Yi Ying reports that 30 candidates have been pre-selected and are currently undergoing a second round of moderate testing, as per his instructions. He approves, noting that he has no use for dead weight or ingrates, but for those willing to work, supplies are practically limitless. She understands perfectly, promising to deliver the full roster of the Night Guard within 3 days. With that settled, he sets down the walkie-talkie and begins to wait, and in less than an hour, the silence is broken. The roar of engines begins to echo from all 4 directions of the ruins simultaneously. We see the vehicles of the 4 major factions pull up before his small shop, with Scorpion leading the way. He sets down 2 heavy metal crates, explaining to Boss Gu that this represents their entire accumulated stock from this period. Wasp follows immediately after, followed by the Ark and Lighthouse factions, and soon the metal crates are swung open. Row after row of gold bars and gold boxes are counted out, which he casually sweeps into his dimensional warehouse. Meanwhile, the leaders of the 4 factions wait patiently in line to collect the various supplies they had pre-ordered. Crate after crate of goods are hauled away, containing everything from tobacco and alcohol to rice, meat, and essential medicines. There are even walkie-talkies and drones among the haul, showing just how much his supply chain is changing the local landscape. Under his steady supply, the quality of life for the factions and the Awakened is rising, and the transaction proceeds without a hitch. By the time the square returns to silence, he has collected nearly 300 kilograms of gold and 42 grams of gold marrow. He immediately absorbs the gold marrow, feeling a surge of cool energy flood through his entire body. He can clearly feel his mental field expanding rapidly, while the precision and strength of his telekinesis increase exponentially. At this moment, his telekinetic limit easily breaks through the 400-kilogram mark. The internal space of his dimensional warehouse also expands to 5,000 cubic meters, just as the sound of engines returns from outside. Bai Lu, Zhou Yuan, and the others pull up in front of the shop, their vehicles loaded with various precision components. Bai Lu walks to the door and addresses him simply as Boss Gu, ready to report on their successful mission. Every core component and material on the list is accounted for, and Li Wenyan stands up, satisfied that everything is in order. At this moment, the Farstar technology facility is bathed in bright lights, the workshop filled with a chaotic, industrious roar. The sound of metal being cut echoes through the air as we see Jiang Yi standing on the second-floor platform. He overlooks the bustling scene below, his eyes bloodshot from exhaustion, yet he remains the calm center of the storm. He continues to issue sharp, decisive commands, keeping the entire technical team under high pressure, relentless momentum. The team moves like a wound-up clockwork mechanism, and just then, the low rumble of a heavy engine breaks through the noise. Boss Gu pulls the truck up to the workshop entrance, and in an instant, countless eyes are fixed upon him. He steps down from the driver's seat, walks to the rear of the vehicle, and pulls open the heavy cargo doors. The interior is packed to the brim with precision parts, prompting Sun Lei to practically scramble toward the truck in excitement. The surrounding technicians surge forward as well, working with frantic speed to unload the precious cargo. Jiang Yi walks over to Boss Gu and says nothing, simply giving him a deep, meaningful look of acknowledgement. He turns back to the team and shouts for Sun Lei to begin installing the core drive shafts immediately. The second group begins pre-calibrating the high-precision sensor arrays, while the third group organizes the core components. Everything is placed into the welding stations in sequence, as he demands the production line be operational before dawn. A thunderous response echoes through the facility, making the very walls of the workshop vibrate with collective energy. The employees dive back into their tasks, and the production line, which was once just a hollow skeleton, begins to transform. Before our eyes, the structure is filled in with intricate, gleaming parts at a truly remarkable pace. Time slips away amidst the mechanical roar, and as the first light of dawn begins to touch the eastern horizon, Sun Lei personally tightens the final high-strength bolt, marking the moment the entire production line is officially complete. Jiang Yi walks to the main control console of the new line and, with a steady hand, presses the start button. Immediately, the heavy hum of electricity spreads through the workshop, and the entire production line awakens like a slumbering steel beast. Hundreds of indicator lights flicker to life in sequence, and we see every eye in the room drawn toward the glowing console. Under the precise coordination of the instruments, the process flows like water, until, just as they reach the final step, a piercing alarm suddenly blares through the facility, warning that the internal pressure has surged far beyond safety limits. Jiang Yi's expression shifts instantly. He lunges toward the control panel, demanding to know exactly what is happening. Sun Lei steps forward as well, his hands moving frantically across the controls as he explains with a trembling voice. It is the reaction peak from the film formation, the far star. One material is simply too powerful for the current settings. The energy released in that instant is so high that the outer casing might not hold, and deep down, everyone's heart sinks. They all assume failure is inevitable. Yet remarkably, the pressure curve begins to drop rapidly, stabilizing within the safe zone. The harsh alarm cuts off just as abruptly as it started, leaving Sun Lei staring at the screen in total disbelief. The far star, one material used its own structure to withstand the energy impact, resulting in a deformation rate of 0 for the alloy shell. He snaps his head toward the production line and shouts that they've succeeded, just as the machinery completes its cycle. At the very end of the line, a single piece of far star, one slowly emerges, followed a second later by a tidal wave of cheering. We hear the veteran technicians, who haven't slept in days, shouting with joy that they have actually done it. Even Jiang Yi cannot stop his hands from trembling as he steps forward to cradle the finished battery in his palms. He turns to the crowd and holds it high, declaring their victory, while Bosku leans against his truck in the distance with a faint smile. After a moment, the cheers begin to fade, and Jiang Yi's gaze regains that sharp, focused intensity we've come to expect. He reminds them that there are now less than 27 hours remaining until the official press conference begins. He announces he will finalize the presentation and speech himself, ordering everyone to dismiss immediately and get some much-needed rest. At 4 in the afternoon, the entire team will gather once more for the final mobilization before the big reveal. After speaking, Jiang Yi hands the battery to you, and you pass it directly to Su Wan, instructing her to keep it safe. The workshop soon returns to its usual rhythm, and we see Jiang Yi begin to outline the layout for the press conference. He suggests dividing the presentation into 3 distinct parts. First, a data-driven showcase of their findings. This would involve using the official report from the Zhongke Testing Center to present their hard data to the world. The second phase would focus on live, physical testing of the product right there on the stage. And finally, he plans to announce their future production capacity and initial intentions for cooperation. Just then, Suwon's phone rings unexpectedly. She looks at the screen, and her face is instantly masked in shock. She hands the phone over, telling President Jiang and Director Guo that they really need to see this. On the screen is a financial news alert. Zhou Zhan, the CEO of Tianheng Energy, is giving an interview. Adopting the posture of an industry leader, she attacks Yuanqing Technology, claiming their production line is a sham. She asserts they lack even the most basic production qualifications, calling for a boycott against such market-disrupting behavior. To make matters worse, the article includes a photo of a destroyed production line as supposed proof. The atmosphere in the factory drops to freezing point until, quite unexpectedly, Jiang Yi begins to laugh. He stands and walks to the machinery, asking Director Guo for permission to change the plan for tomorrow's conference. Instead of a standard product introduction, he wants to fill the entire workshop with cameras. They will live-stream the live production of a brand-new Yuanqing, one battery to the entire world. Then, they will subject it to a hell mode test before dismantling it in front of everyone. He wants the world to see that Yuanqing, one is no empty shell, asking if the media and platforms can be arranged. Jiang Yi's voice is incredibly firm as he confirms it can be done, and you nod slowly in response. You then pull your phone from your pocket and make a call, ordering an invitation to be sent to Tianheng Energy headquarters. He tells them to reserve a seat right in the center of the front row for the upcoming press conference. A little later, in the chairman's office at Tianheng Energy, Zhou Zhan has just finished a meeting with investment institutions. He has successfully turned the name Yuanqing Technology into a synonym for a capital-driven scam. That exclusive interview now dominates the headlines of every major financial outlet, and in his mind, the war is already over. However, just then, his chief assistant enters the office to deliver an unexpected update to President Zhou. They have invited him to attend tomorrow's product launch, and Zhou Zhan takes the invitation to open it. As he reads the provocative words written there, a sharp surge of anger rises deep within him. He scoffs that this is merely a clown who doesn't know his place, telling his assistant that he accepts the invitation. He wants to see with his own eyes how they plan to end this farce, and the assistant nods before quickly exiting. By that afternoon, the internet is in an absolute frenzy after Tianheng Energy's official account makes a high-profile announcement. Chairman Zhou Zhan will attend the Yuanqing conference to expose the industry scam and protect market order. Immediately following this, the official Yuanqing Technology account releases a single, striking poster. The poster features only a few bold lines, stating they are hosting a completely transparent public demonstration. from parts to batteries, and production to dismantling. They invite the world to watch the global livestream tomorrow at 10. This poster acts like a heavy bomb exploding across social media, instantly turning the event into a national obsession. We return to the Yuanqing Technology Factory grounds, where the atmosphere is thick with final preparations. Sun Lei is leading a team of technicians to inspect the production line, while Zhang Yi approaches Director Gua. He remarks that the director's current outfit might not be enough to command the stage at tomorrow's big event. Gua looks down at his clothes and realizes Zhang Yi is right. Appearances do matter in a battle of optics. And so, the two of them head off to the city's most exclusive luxury shopping mall to prepare. A short while later, we see Gua pull up to the mall in his truck before heading into a high-end tailor shop with Zhang Yi. Upon entering, Zhang Yi immediately states that they need a suit for tomorrow, something with a fabric that commands the room. He specifies it shouldn't be too flashy, and the master tailor assesses Gua's frame with a single, professional glance. The tailor turns to pull out several samples, noting that these particular Italian wools are of the finest quality. Zhang Yi feels the fabric and makes his choice, leading into the tedious but necessary process of taking precise measurements. Just then, a sarcastic voice cuts through the air, mockingly addressing Gua as the big boss. The voice sneers, asking if the money from his small shop is even enough to buy a scrap of fabric here. Wang Hao walks in with Zhang Qian on his arm, and the moment she sees Gua, her face twists with pure disdain. Zhang Qian tells Wang Hao not to be so harsh, though she adds that the clothes here are certainly not cheap. She mocks the idea of Gua paying off his 300,000 debt, but Gua has long since moved past his history with her. And so, he remains completely silent, calmly continuing with his fitting as if they weren't even there. This total indifference leaves Zhang Qian feeling humiliated and furious, while Zhang Yi instantly deduces the nature of their past. Zhang Yi steps forward, his gaze locking onto Wang Hao as he identifies him as the son of Hongda Construction's president. Wang Hao arrogantly confirms it, assuming Zhang Yi is simply trying to flatter him, which, as we will see, is a mistake. Instead, Zhang Yi calmly remarks that Wang Hao's company is facing a total collapse of their capital chain on the Chengnan project. He reveals that Wang Hao's father misappropriated 300 million in special bank loans just to cover the massive hole. He estimates that Hongda has less than 20 million in liquid assets left, with the final repayment date looming on the 15th. As the words sink in, Wang Hao stands frozen in place, his face pale with absolute terror. He cannot fathom how Zhang Yi knows these insider secrets, and suddenly, his arrogant posturing is torn to shreds. Zhang Yi doesn't even bother giving him a second look, turning back to the tailor to finalize the measurements for the suit. Zhang Yi continues his instructions, requesting 2 sets of top-tier shirts and 3 matching ties to complete the look. He specifies that everything must be delivered to a particular address by 9 o'clock the following morning. With that settled, he pulls a business card from his bag and places it calmly on the counter. The bold letters of Yuanqing Technology on the card immediately catch Wang Hao's attention. For a moment, recent news headlines flash through his mind, but then Wang Hao erupts into a fit of near-manic laughter. He sneers, asking what right the president of a fraudulent company has to investigate his family's business. Zhang Qian also recalls the trending rumors and joins in the mockery, suggesting Gua has simply latched onto a wealthy scammer. She laughs that they are a perfect match, while Zhang Yi watches the display with a look of utter indifference. However, Wang Hao steps forward aggressively, nearly poking his finger directly into Zhang Yi's face. He demands an immediate kneeling apology, threatening to shut down their company with a single phone call. At this, Gua steps across to shield Zhang Yi, meeting Wang Hao's gaze with a look that is bone-chillingly cold. Wang Hao flinches, suddenly panicked, but Gua doesn't lift a finger. He simply speaks in a calm, steady voice. He invites Wang Hao to the Yuanqing Technology Factory at 10 tomorrow morning, suggesting he bring his media friends along. Without another word, Gua gestures for Zhang Yi to follow, and the two of them walk out, leaving the pair behind. A wave of humiliation washes over Wang Hao as Gua's parting words continue to ring in his ears. It felt like the dismissive charity of a superior who doesn't need to explain himself, and Wang Hao's eyes flash with malice. He vows to show the world exactly what kind of person Gua really is. The next morning, at 9 o'clock, the once deserted Qingdong industrial zone suddenly becomes the focal point of the entire city, if not the country. We see the entrance to the Yuanqing Technology Factory completely swamped by an enormous, restless crowd. The sheer number of media vans has practically brought traffic on the surrounding roads to a complete standstill. We see countless influencers holding up their phones for live streams, and suddenly, a wave of excitement ripples through the restless crowd. A Rolls-Royce Phantom glides slowly toward the factory entrance, coming to a smooth stop as everyone watches with bated breath. Zhou Jin steps out, flanked by a group of stern bodyguards, wearing a smile that is both gentle and remarkably confident. Immediately, the air is filled with the flash of cameras as reporters swarm him, eager to catch even a single word. They shout over one another, asking if he finally has the evidence to prove that Yuanxing technology is nothing but a fraud. Others ask for his thoughts on this suicidal live-streamed stunt, causing Zhou Jun to pause and consider the question. He turns to face the cameras with a practiced smile, claiming he isn't there to attack anyone today, or so he says. He presents himself merely as an old veteran who has spent half his life struggling and building within the battery industry. He claims he is only there to witness the rise of a newcomer, adding that as for the truth, well, he trusts the facts. With that vague but pointed statement, Zhou Jun makes his way into the venue, leaving the reporters buzzing behind him. Just then, a bright red Ferrari pulls up, and Wang Hao steps out with Zhang Qian on his arm, looking incredibly smug. He is followed closely by his usual entourage of media friends, all of them ready to capture the impending downfall. A moment later, Wang Hao leads Zhang Qian through the crowd and into the venue, basking in the attention of the onlookers. Inside the factory, the seating has been arranged into several distinct sections, all of them facing the main production line. Beside the machinery, over a dozen high-definition cameras have been set up on professional rigs to capture every single movement. They are positioned to record every detail of the process, yet the entire hall remains eerily quiet, almost unnervingly so. Everyone present seems momentarily stunned by the sheer scale of the setup as the minutes slowly tick away toward the deadline. At exactly 10 o'clock, the lights in the hall suddenly plunge into darkness, and the eyes of the entire world focus here. A single spotlight cuts through the dark from the ceiling, illuminating the sleek, futuristic production line waiting in the center. At the same time, the live cameras sync up, broadcasting the crisp images to electronic screens across the globe for all to see. Inside the venue, the air is thick with the murmur of the crowd, while Zhou Jun sits in the front row with his brow furrowed in deep thought. He realizes immediately that something is off as he stares at a production line that seems to defy everything he knows about the industry. As Zhou Jun's unease continues to grow, Jiang Yi steps forward with a steady, composed pace that commands the room's attention. He stops directly in front of the production line and greets the guests and media, wishing everyone a formal good morning. He introduces himself as Jiang Yi, the president of Yuanxing Technology, and announces that today they will demonstrate something truly remarkable. We learn that they intend to manufacture a Yuanxing 1 battery from scratch, starting with the most basic raw materials. With a nod, he invites their chairman, Mr. Xiaogua, to take the stage and lead the demonstration. As his voice fades, your figure appears before the crowd, dressed in a custom suit with eyes as calm and steady as still water. You walk casually toward the control console of the production line, leaning against it with an air of effortless confidence. You welcome everyone to the launch, echoing Jiang Yi's words by stating that today, the company is here to do only one thing. Live production is the goal, and as you press the button on the console, the silent production line suddenly roars to life. Hundreds of indicator lights flicker on in sequence, and the mechanical arms rise slowly into their standby positions. At the same time, the electronic screens light up, divided into several distinct zones to show every angle of the process. The main screen displays a sharp close-up of the first station on the production line, focusing on the very beginning of the journey. We see a vast array of raw materials laid out under the lens as Jiang Yi begins to introduce each one in detail. From silicon dioxide to graphite powder, the display is met with Zhou Jun's open mockery, as he dismisses it all as mere smoke and mirrors. He wonders if this is just a desperate attempt to stall for time, while Wang Hao laughs so hard he can barely keep his balance. He mockingly asks if they are giving a science lesson to middle schoolers, a sentiment echoed by the sarcastic comments flooding the live stream. However, the production line suddenly kicks into gear, and we see the mechanical arms precisely grab the measured raw materials. They are dropped into the sealed furnace equipment, and on the screen, the internal temperature data begins to skyrocket instantly. At the same time, Jiang Yi begins to explain calmly that through their unique plasma roasting technology, they can actually decompose the raw materials into an atomic state and strip away every single impurity. This allows them to obtain pure silicon, lithium, and carbon before beginning the structural transformation of the silicon atoms. The goal is to form a unique, three-dimensional porous silicon-carbon skeleton, a feat that sounds almost like science fiction. This, we are told, is the absolute key to achieving such ultra-high energy density and stability. As Jiang Yi speaks, each word lands like a heavy bombshell, causing the smile on Zhou Jun's face to freeze completely. These technical terms were things he had only glimpsed in cutting-edge journals, or perhaps even in the pages of a novel. Suddenly, Zhou Jun sits bolt upright, his eyes fixed on the data flickering across the screen with impossible speed. Every metric on the display seems perfect, and after a moment, he leans over to whisper a sharp command to his technical director. He demands to know where this technology came from, but the director can only wipe the cold sweat from his brow. He informs Zhou Jun that there are fewer than 5 labs on the entire planet capable of achieving such a thing. Furthermore, their samples are usually measured in mere milligrams, and hearing this, Zhou Jun feels his heart begin to sink. Just then, the production moves to the next stage, and Jiang Yi continues his steady, rhythmic narration of the process. As one complex concept follows another, Zhou Jun suddenly snaps his head up, a new thought taking hold. A sharp, ruthless light glints in his eyes as he convinces himself he has finally found the flaw in this grand deception. He decides this must be a pre-recorded video, believing that if he makes an impossible demand, the illusion will shatter. With that thought, he casts aside his hesitation, certain that he is about to expose the entire fraud to the world. He stands up abruptly from his seat, cutting Jiang Yi off mid-sentence and calling for the president to wait a moment. He admits the technology is breathtaking, but then asks, with a hint of a sneer, how they can be sure of its reality. He suggests it might just be a well-crafted video, and the moment the words leave his mouth, the crowd erupts in a frenzy. The crowd begins to voice their doubts one after another, and at this moment, the cold sneer on Zhou Jun's face only deepens. He demands that they stop playing the video immediately and let any member of the media present choose a random spot. He wants them to use their own cameras to film the production line in real time and broadcast the feed directly onto the big screen. If they can actually pull that off, he promises to apologize to them in front of the entire world. As his voice fades, the entire factory floor falls into a heavy silence, with every eye in the room fixed on the protagonist and Jiang Yi. Wang Haowen is trembling with excitement, certain they won't dare to do it, and muttering that they are nothing but a pack of liars. Time ticks away, second by second, until finally, we see the protagonist slowly straighten his posture. He steps forward to the very edge of the stage and simply says, "Fine." His answer lands like a sudden crack of thunder. The word echoes through everyone's mind, and even the triumphant smile on Zhou Jun's face freezes in an instant. Still, he forces down the shock rising in his heart, remarking that Chairman Gua is being exceptionally bold and tells them to begin. With that, Zhou Jun sends out his company's chief photographer, while Jiang Yi turns to signal the staff with a sharp gesture. A staff member quickly brings up a data cable, and Jiang Yi explains that this is a spare interface for the equipment. He tells Zhou Jun it can connect directly to the big screen and invites him to proceed, which, naturally, makes Zhou Jun grit his teeth. He walks over to the photographer himself to ensure the data cable is properly connected. Then, he orders the photographer to aim the lens directly at the ultrasonic fusion equipment, shouting his demands for all to hear. He insists they restart this specific process right now, as he intends to film the interior of the device through every single step. This demand is even more demanding than the last, yet the protagonist's reaction defies expectations once again. No problem. He adds that standing below the stage might not offer a clear enough view, so he invites Zhou Jun and the photographer to come up. He offers them the chance to verify every operation at zero distance, a proposal that leaves the entire venue in a state of total shock. Zhou Jun's mind goes completely blank for a moment. Stepping onto that stage means he is fully committing to the role of the challenger. Under the watchful gaze of the entire world, he begins to examine everything, realizing that if this technology is actually real, he will become the biggest laughingstock of the century. But refusing to step up would be a silent admission of his own cowardice. With that thought, Zhou Jun takes a deep breath and finally begins his long walk up onto the stage. The photographer follows closely behind him, while our protagonist, seeing them approach, wastes no time on useless words. He simply turns back to the console and presses a button, and a second later, the production line hums to life. As the material fusion process begins, the photographer quickly presses the camera lens against the equipment to capture every detail. At that moment, the big screen displays the live feed from the camera, showing 2 streams of colored powder being injected. Immediately after, the materials begin to rotate at high speeds, looking very much like a swirling nebula. We see them being pulled and torn apart by an invisible force, transforming into 2 dense clouds of mist. Then, guided by a peculiar field, they merge into a perfectly flawless, saturated cloud. The entire process carries the surreal beauty of a sci-fi film, while the real-time data displays alongside it. Every single indicator reaches a perfect value, and as the process ends, we see Zhou Jun's entire body begin to tremble. His face is a mask of pure terror. To him, this couldn't possibly be real, and must surely be some kind of hallucination. It is then that the protagonist speaks up calmly, asking Mr. Zhou if he saw clearly or if he'd like to see it one more time. The suggestion of offering his face up to be slapped again makes Zhou Jun's vision go dark, nearly causing him to faint on the spot. Below the stage, the executive team from Tianheng Energy has descended into utter chaos as they realize the gravity of the situation. They know that from today on, Tianheng Energy is finished, but meanwhile, the camera on the big screen switches views. Battery production continues, and more sci-fi-like equipment begins to operate one after another. Each step of the process continues to shock the global audience, and right at that moment, a sudden cry rings out. A financial reporter holding a phone screams that Tianheng Energy stock has hit the circuit breaker just 3 minutes after opening. All related stocks have completely collapsed as well. The moment those words are spoken, no one is paying attention to the production line anymore. Everyone quickly pulls out their phones to check the stock market, while Wang Hao sits there in a daze, frozen in place. His phone rings incessantly, and when he finally answers, his father's furious voice comes through, asking what on earth he has done. The stock price has crashed, and the company is finished. He demands to know why his son ever decided to provoke Bosqua. Before the words even finish, Wang Hao's hand drops weakly. Amidst the chaos, Jiang Yi's voice rings out once again. Starting from a single grain of sand to a completed Star 1 battery, the entire process is now laid bare before us. The total time taken was 15 minutes and 23 seconds. And with that, he announces that today's live stream has come to an end. After speaking, he gives a slight bow to the audience. He then turns toward our protagonist, who stands up as he approaches. Without sparing a single glance at the strange scene below the stage, they walk together into the metal doors of the backstage area. They leave behind a crowd drowning in a sea of complex emotions. The moment the backstage door closes, it feels as if they've entered another world. Outside those doors is a tsunami of chaos and madness, but inside, the silence is so heavy you could hear a pin drop. Jiang Yi lets out a long, weary breath, remarking that it's finally over. But deep down, he knows it isn't over at all. This is merely the beginning. Jiang Yi gives a bitter smile and shakes his head, but before he can speak, his phone begins to vibrate violently. He picks it up to see the screen covered in a dense wall of missed calls and message notifications. Countless world-renowned electronic brands are reaching out. It seems the entire world wants a piece of their technology. He suggests they should immediately expand production to step into every field that requires energy. However, our protagonist remains perfectly calm. He asks how many batteries that single production line can actually produce in a day. Compared to the giants who demand orders of hundreds of millions, their current capacity is quite small. In fact, our production capacity is as tiny as a grain of dust. If we fail to meet the market's expectations, things will turn sour. Sooner or later, this same force will tear them apart. Hearing this, Jiang Yi's expression becomes incredibly solemn. Jiang Yi asks what they should do next. At that moment, our protagonist walks over and raises a single finger, focusing all his energy on a single point. He explains they must break through one specific sector, new energy vehicles. With the same production capacity, the profit from car batteries could increase tenfold. At the same time, they need to make the world understand that only the most elite, top-tier vehicles are worthy of using the Star 1 battery. Jiang Yi instantly grasps the strategy, but a sense of helplessness washes over him. Building a new production line would take a year at the very least. He tells himself they simply can't wait that long. But our protagonist just smiles, asking who said anything about building one when a perfect path already exists. He wants Jiang Yi to buy the Tianheng energy production plant. For a moment, Jiang Yi's mind goes completely blank. It was a bold move, to say the least. He instinctively points out that although Tianheng Energy's stock price has collapsed, the company hasn't officially declared bankruptcy yet. And even if they do go bankrupt, the legal proceedings would have to begin, which is always a messy affair. That process wouldn't be finished for a year or more. But our protagonist insists they don't need to wait, because behind Tianheng Energy lies a mountain of debt. They owe astronomical sums in bank loans. Now that the company has fallen, the ones most terrified are the banks that lent them the money. From here on out, the banks will be more than happy to talk to anyone willing to take the disaster that is Tianheng off their hands. Hearing this, Jiang Yi's breathing quickens with excitement. He realizes he needs to contact the bank that provided Tianheng with the most loans immediately. Without a moment's further hesitation, Jiang Yi walks over to his desk to begin the search for the necessary information. Meanwhile, we see that the chairman's office at Tianheng Energy is in a state of absolute ruin, looking like a literal disaster zone. Countless torn documents are scattered across the floor, while Zhou Jun sits slumped on the sofa, looking utterly soul-crushed. He still can't wrap his head around where those production machines could have possibly come from. Suddenly, the encrypted phone on his desk begins to ring. It's the private line used to contact President Li, a high-ranking bank official. The sharp sound makes Zhou Jun flinch in his seat. His body trembles violently as he struggles to stand up and answer the call. On the other end, a cold, detached male voice speaks. The voice addresses him as President Zhou, noting that the abnormal fluctuations in his company's stock have triggered mandatory liquidation and collateral clauses. And now, the bank is demanding that he immediately repay the total loan amount of 7.2 billion. A perfectly ordinary Tuesday, in other words. Tianheng Energy has lost all its value, and hearing those words makes Zhou Jun tremble from head to toe. He knows the man on the other end is telling the truth, yet after a few seconds of silence, the voice speaks again. However, just half an hour ago, Yuanqing Technology called. They are willing to acquire the company in its entirety. This includes all assets in the Changnan Industrial Park, the factory buildings, the equipment, and even the land use rights. Zhou Jun's vision goes dark as a wave of humiliation and fury crashes through his reason. He tells himself this must be a nightmare. He screams that he would rather burn the entire factory to the ground than give it to them, his voice echoing through the office. Zhou Jun lets out a desperate, hoarse roar, but the cold response from the other end reminds him that the industrial park is the key. Since it serves as core collateral, the bank has the right to dispose of it unilaterally. They aren't asking, they are simply informing him. If he refuses, he will be left with absolutely nothing and no hope of a comeback. With that, the line goes dead. Zhou Jun is left standing there in a daze. Meanwhile, we return to the Yuanqing Technology Office, where Jiang Yi has just finished a call. After speaking with President Li, he looks at our protagonist and reports that the bank has officially agreed to the acquisition. They will begin pressuring Zhou Jun immediately. Our protagonist doesn't even turn around, his focus already elsewhere. Jiang Yi is momentarily stunned by the sheer speed of it all, but he suppresses his shock and simply says he understands. He promises to handle every detail, and after a brief nod, our protagonist makes his way toward the production workshop. Inside, the atmosphere is electric as employees discuss the recent success. As our protagonist walks before the crowd, a hush falls. Every eye in the room is fixed on him. He scans the faces of his team and calmly notes how hard everyone has worked lately. He tells them the launch was a success and promises he won't mistreat anyone who trusted him. Starting this month, things will change. Every employee's salary is to be increased by 100%. As the words land, the entire workshop falls into a stunned silence. The quiet lasts for several long moments before erupting into a deafening, mountain-shaking roar of cheers. Our protagonist ignores the wild celebration of the staff, simply gesturing for Sun Lei to come over. He turns and walks into the independent control room next door, and seeing this, Sun Lei quickly follows behind him. Inside the control room, our protagonist calmly states that the Tianheng Energy Industrial Park in the south will soon be theirs. He instructs Sun Lei to immediately form a special task force to integrate their technology with Tianheng's existing production lines. The goal is to create the fastest and most cost-effective modification plan possible, a prospect that makes Sun Lei's breath hitch. He hadn't expected the massive assets of Tianheng Energy to be acquired so soon, but he quickly regains his composure. Deep down, he worries that Tianheng's lines can't produce the Yuanqing one, and that modifications would take far too much time. However, our protagonist shakes his head, suggesting they sacrifice some exclusive technology to use the existing equipment instead. They will produce a simplified version of the Yuanqing battery, with performance that is still enough to crush every lithium battery on the market. This approach will also reduce the workload exponentially. Sun Lei realizes they can now launch two distinct product series. Their own factory will supply high-end cars and aviation, while the Tianheng plant will be used to seize the mid-range market. Sun Lei promises to finish the preliminary report within 2 days and leaves immediately. Not long after, Jiang Yi enters the room. He pushes open the door and hands a tablet to our protagonist, reporting that the bank has officially accepted their acquisition offer. The bank has already initiated the asset preservation process for Tianheng Energy, effectively locking down the company's resources. They have accepted nearly all of the protagonist's conditions, yet he barely spares the document a single glance. He reminds Jiang Yi that these decisions are entirely in his hands, then asks him to follow up on the plan he just gave Sun Lei. With a simple instruction to text him if anything comes up, he stands and leaves. To be honest, he has more pressing matters to attend to. Now, he needs to purchase supplies before returning to the Doomsday Era to continue his treasure hunting. Half an hour later, he arrives. He pulls up to the Global Warehouse Wholesale Market, one of the largest supply distribution centers in the entire city. After looking around, he walks directly into the market management office and announces that he needs to purchase a large batch of goods. He places a list on the desk. The manager picks it up with a casual air, scanning the items with little interest at first. In the next second, his expression freezes as he reads the request: 500 tons each of rice and flour, and 100 tons of frozen meat. The manager asks if there's a mistake, but our protagonist simply shows his bank balance, causing the man's attitude to shift instantly. With a sudden, fawning smile, he begs the guest to wait while he coordinates everything to ensure the fastest delivery possible. Over the next few hours, the entire wholesale market erupts into a frenzy of activity as countless forklifts and porters are mobilized. Bags of rice and crates of frozen meat are hauled out of the warehouses and loaded onto more than a dozen vehicles. As the massive container trucks are filled, our protagonist inspects the quality before heading to a temporary transit warehouse he rented nearby. Soon, the heavily loaded trucks begin rolling into the warehouse one after another to drop off their massive cargo. The goods on the list quickly pile up like a mountain, and once everything arrives, he pays the total without a moment's hesitation. This decisive payment makes the manager even more enthusiastic, promising the best possible discounts for any future business. Before long, he sends everyone away and stands alone before the mountain of rice bags, casually waving his hand. In the blink of an eye, the massive pile of supplies vanishes into thin air, reappearing perfectly organized within his dimensional storage. The entire process is quiet and efficient. Besides the food, he has also procured tons of oil, salt, and sugar. There are walls of canned goods, compressed biscuits, instant noodles, and a vast array of medicines and medical equipment. He even ordered hundreds of barrels of gasoline and diesel, yet he notices that a tenth of his dimensional space remains empty. He immediately drives to a large hardware and building materials market to stock up on various industrial supplies. He even manages to secure several sets of CNC machine tools and 3D printing equipment to bring along. Only when the dimensional warehouse is completely stuffed to capacity does he finally drive his truck back to the small shop. The familiar sensation of weightlessness descends as the world before his eyes begins to twist and fold in on itself. A second later, he arrives back in the Doomsday era, standing quietly as he adjusts to the sensory shock of the transit. After a moment, he picks up the walkie-talkie and asks Ying about the status of the technicians, hearing that everything is going smoothly. Ying reports that, following his orders, they have successfully repaired the park's entire surveillance and alarm system. They have established 3 defensive lines centered around the dormitory area, ensuring that not even a rustle of grass escapes their eyes. Over the last few days, more than 300 wastelanders tried to infiltrate the park, and they managed to capture a portion of them. The team now has 43 official members. He tells her she has done a great job, exceeding even his own expectations. He instructs her to send people to the plaza because he has brought supplies, and Yi Ying's crisp, energetic reply comes through immediately. After ending that call, he switches to the public channel and issues a short, simple statement. The trade will proceed as usual. Those words hit like a depth charge, and a second later, responses from the various factions begin to flood the walkie-talkie. Pan Shi, Feng Chao, Deng Ta, and Feng Zhou all check in. It seems his 2-day absence had caused quite a stir. The 4 major powers had been feeling incredibly uneasy, especially after having tasted the luxury of fresh beef, tobacco, and alcohol. To be honest, once you've had a taste of the good life, no one wants to go back to the way things were before. Rumors had even begun to circulate that he was unhappy with the trades, or worse, that he had met with some unfortunate end. His sudden return acts as a massive weight off their shoulders, instantly calming the growing tension among the factions. The team arrives led by the scarred, burly man, Dao Ba, whose face no longer shows even a hint of his former arrogance. Instead, he looks on with a mix of awe and fanaticism as he greets the boss, and our protagonist responds with a simple wave. In the next moment, crates of supplies appear, canned goods, seafood, lamb chops, and even snacks like peanuts and beer. He even includes several brand new portable generators, explaining that these are their rewards and necessary supplies. He tells Dao Ba to let Ying know she can act freely, as supplies are guaranteed. The big man's eyes actually redden with gratitude. After the team departs, the trading convoys from the 4 major powers begin to arrive at the plaza one after another. This time, they have brought an even larger quantity of gold and jewelry, and the entire trading process moves with incredible speed. The leaders of these 4 powers behave like disciplined school children in his presence, and soon, the plaza is empty once again. We return to the scene as he begins to tally his latest haul, finding over 500 kilograms of gold and 63 golden boxes. Without a moment's hesitation, he proceeds to absorb every single one of those golden boxes. In an instant, a massive surge of energy explodes within his body, and his telekinetic limit easily breaks through the 500-kilogram mark. At the same time, his dimensional warehouse expands to 6,000 cubic meters, and he unlocks a new ability, spatial displacement. Now, he can consume mental energy to blink anywhere within a 20-meter range before his mental strength is depleted. He can use this flash step at least 30 times. Naturally, he begins to test his new limits immediately. He concentrates his telekinesis on a coin and fires it. In a mere heartbeat, the coin's velocity accelerates to supersonic speeds. Feeling the surging power within him, he laughs aloud. After all, strength is the most fundamental law of this wasteland world. Next, he uses the walkie-talkie to contact Feng Zhou, ordering Zhou Yuan and Wang Zhoming to meet him at the plaza. Bai Lu's reply comes without the slightest delay, and soon enough, the Feng Zhou convoy arrives at the square. Several fully armed soldiers escort Zhou Yuan and Wang Zhoming as the 2 men quickly step forward to meet him. A moment later, he walks to the entrance of the small shop and asks where he can obtain more specialized parts. Wang Zhoming takes a deep breath upon hearing this, noting there are 3 production bases, though the situation is far from ideal. The first is in the heavy industrial zone to the north, which happens to be one of the most densely infested zombie areas. The second is at the western suburban logistics port. It once had a massive population, but now it has become a city of death. As for the third, it is quite far away, and given the current state of the roads, reaching it would be incredibly difficult. He then asks what other technologies the Tianxiong company possesses besides the Thor 7 batteries, prompting a quick glance between the 2 men. Wang Zhoming explains that the Thor 8 has an energy density 3 times that of the previous model. It even possesses an instantaneous overload output capability, specifically developed for certain high-end, specialized equipment. However, its core materials are exceptionally rare, and the manufacturing process is so complex that the costs are simply astronomical. The company only kept a single production line at the western suburban logistics port. Hearing this, he falls into a thoughtful silence. The atmosphere grows heavy for a moment, until suddenly, Zhou Yuan speaks up with a surge of excitement. Tianxiong was far more than just a battery supplier. Before the cataclysm, the company had invested massive sums into a new project. They launched the Pathfinder technology, aiming to create the Pathfinder 1, a machine designed for large-scale construction and mining. standing roughly 6 meters tall and fully electric. It could be equipped with up to 6 Thor 8 batteries at once. On a full charge, it could operate at high intensity for 72 hours. Hearing this, he begins to consider the possibilities. Even if this machine wasn't originally built for combat, with just a few modifications, it could be changed significantly. It could become a true engine of war, and with that thought in mind, he immediately begins to press for more details. As they talk, he learns that the core research base for the Pathfinder is located in Haijo City, 200 kilometers away. Inside that base are 3 completed Pathfinders, parts for 10 more, and an entire production line ready for use. Though the journey there would be incredibly dangerous, he can't stop his heart from racing at the potential of such a find. The impact of securing the Pathfinder would be 100 times greater than that of the Thor 7 batteries. He decides he must get his hands on it, but quickly calms himself and tells the men they are free to leave. After that, he turns back toward the small shop and slowly pulls down the rolling shutter, sealing himself off from the outside world. Not long after, the roar of an armored vehicle's engine echoes across the square before slowly fading away into the distance. Back inside the shop, he settles into a chair and begins a mental brainstorm, weighing his options carefully. Going alone would be far too risky, yet the Nightblade squad is simply too small for an operation of this scale. The 4 major factions are too disorganized, with complicated hierarchies and equipment that is, to be honest, quite inconsistent. Even the Tuba Society struggles to break into the Western logistics port. What he truly needs is thousands of reliable men. He needs a well-equipped army with an iron will, and building such a force would require a truly massive amount of resources. He also needs a secure base to protect his rear. Using the small shop as a core, he plans to begin a massive construction project. The goal is to build a perfectly fortified stronghold and gradually expand outward, digging up everything of value from the ruins of the old world. As the initial vision takes shape, we see him immediately pick up the walkie-talkie to contact Ying. He tells her he has a new plan, to build a base centered around the shop square, and for that, he needs manpower. He requires anyone with experience in construction or industry. Her task is to find these people and bring them to him. Hearing this, Yi Ying's breathing quickens. She suppresses her shock and immediately promises to get to work. After ending the call, he switches to the public channel and announces that he, Xiaogua, is establishing a permanent trading post at the square. This will be a designated safety zone, and starting tomorrow, large-scale construction will begin on the site. During construction, he demands security, at a scale twice that of the assault on the Tianxiong Technology Park. Supplies will be settled daily. These words hit the leaders of the 4 major factions like a heavy sledgehammer to the chest. They are filled with a mix of shock and fury, yet they have no other choice, simply because he has endless resources to back him up. He isn't worried about a rebellion from the factions. He has more important things to do, and we see him pull out a piece of paper. Using a pen, he quickly begins sketching on the back, using the small shop as the starting point for his new world. With the entire central square as the core, the first step is a wall, one strong enough to withstand a massive tide of the infected. It must even be able to withstand the impact of heavy mutants. He estimates the height must reach at least 10 meters. The thickness cannot be less than 3 meters, and the entire wall must be poured with reinforced concrete. Inside, he plans to bury high-strength alloy steel plates as a skeleton. To be honest, this is a truly staggering engineering feat. The materials required would be an astronomical amount, yet in his eyes, this isn't a problem whatsoever. All he needs is a large enough warehouse and a procurement list that is equally massive. As dawn begins to break, the area outside the rolling shutter is already crowded with scavengers full of hope and expectation. Xiaogua steps out of the shop and gets straight to the point, announcing he is recruiting workers and offering 3 meals a day with meat. The survivors instantly erupt in excitement at his words. He offers no explanation, simply raising his hand with a casual wave. In the next second, several crates of canned luncheon meat appear out of thin air, and he calmly tells the crowd to spread the word. He explains that the square is recruiting for a new stronghold, and anyone willing to work should come forward to register now. These cans are their payment for spreading the news, 1 per person, and he notes that construction will officially begin in 8 hours. At that moment, a man steps out from the crowd with a determined stride and grabs one of the cans. He turns toward the depths of the ruins, eager to share the good news with his family, and seeing this, the others follow suit. The rest of the crowd reacts instantly, rushing like mad toward every corner of the city to deliver the message. Once the scavengers have cleared the square, we see him pick up his walkie-talkie to contact Ying once more. He instructs her to gather all her people and have them assemble at the square in 8 hours' time. They must be ready to receive the first batch of construction workers and supplies. Then, he switches back to the public channel. He announces that the project will begin on schedule, and he expects the defense forces to be in position before work starts. He promises that the first day's wages will be paid in 8 hours, and with that, he cuts the communication. Without even waiting for a reply, he pulls down the rolling shutter and initiates the jump, feeling that familiar sense of weightlessness. We return to the real world, where a mountain of supplies awaits procurement, and his thoughts immediately turn to Elder Tang. He pulls out his phone and calls Su-won, telling her he has a new shipment weighing 800 kilograms. He insists on reporting to Elder Tang immediately. Su-won's voice trembles with shock before the Elder himself takes the phone. Elder Tang offers the same price as last time, which Xiaoguo accepts, though he adds that he needs more than just cash. He requests as much cement and rebar as possible, along with excavators, bulldozers, and any other functional engineering machinery. As his request hangs in the air, Elder Tang falls into a long, thoughtful silence before finally speaking. Elder Tang notes that the quantity of materials Xiaoguo is requesting is certainly not small. He explains that gathering everything at once will take time, his voice carrying a hint of calculated caution. Xiaoguo replies that while this might be a problem for others, he is certain it won't be for the Elder. He states firmly that he expects results within 6 hours, and with that, he hangs up the phone. We see Elder Tang resting his eyes in his study, while Su-won watches him with growing concern. She points out that this request exceeds their usual business scope and is impossible to fulfill through normal channels so quickly. Furthermore, such a massive move will surely attract unwanted attention, but the Elder slowly opens his eyes. He asks her rhetorically if Xiaoguo didn't already attract attention the moment he produced the Yuanxing, 1 stone. The people at the top have noticed him long ago, so their own small movements are nothing by comparison. He orders that everything must be gathered within 6 hours, even if they have to drive the prices up. The supplies must be in place immediately. Su-won nods, knowing the Elder has made his final decision. This is a massive gamble, with the Tang family's future at stake, while elsewhere, Xiaoguo sets out again. At the global wholesale market, the manager greets him with a fawning smile, welcoming Boss Guo back. Xiaoguo says nothing, simply handing over a new list which the manager accepts with both hands. In the next second, the manager's eyes nearly pop out as he sees the volume is triple their last order. The list includes 5,000 sets of tints and hard hats. The manager's hands begin to tremble as he reads. Xiaoguo's voice remains perfectly calm as he tells him to prepare the goods, for money is no object. The manager assures him he understands and rushes toward the warehouse area without asking a single question. The entire wholesale market is once again thrown into a frenzy of activity while Xiaoguo rents the same transit warehouse. He stands at the entrance watching truck after truck deliver the goods, until finally, the last crate is moved inside. As the goods are stored away in his dimensional warehouse, Su-won sends a message stating that everything is now in place. The supplies are waiting at the abandoned industrial park in Qingdong, ready for handover. Meanwhile, Jiang Yi calls with more news. A director named Zhang from the Ministry of Energy has specifically asked to meet, showing great interest in their batteries. He is particularly curious about the future production capacity planning, and he intends to visit the following morning at 10. He will lead a team to Yuanxing Technology personally. Xiaoguo is told to handle the reception while Zhang manages the rest. To finalize the acquisition of the Tianheng production park, a first installment of 300 million is required immediately. Xiaoguo agrees to handle the funds without a second thought, and shortly after hanging up, he arrives at the Jingxin tea house. Su-won is already waiting at the entrance to greet him, and he points towards several crates in his vehicle. He tells her the items are all there and suggests she find someone to move them, which she begins arranging immediately. She then leads him to the meeting room, where we see Elder Tang waiting with a warm, satisfied smile on his face. The Elder announces that he has fulfilled his mission and gathered everything requested, prompting a rare smile from Xiaoguo. Xiaoguo thanks him for the trouble, though the Elder insists that such effort was only to be expected. The total price for the gold comes to 656 million, while the other supplies are also accounted for. At cost, those materials total 180 million, and the funds for the Tianheng acquisition are also prepared. The Elder explains that Su-won has the money ready, and the remainder will be transferred along with the previous funds. Everything will be sent to his account shortly. Furthermore, to celebrate the success of the recent press conference, the Elder offers an additional 5 million from his personal funds as a gift, asking Xiaoguo not to refuse him. Xiaoguo remarks that this hardly feels like a standard business deal, but the Elder simply begins to laugh. He admits that from the moment the Yuanxing, 1 stone appeared, he knew Xiaoguo was destined for greatness. The Elder acknowledges his own age, noting that the Tang family's legacy must be secured for the future. The Elder explains that he has decided to stand firmly by Xiaoguo's side, promising to provide whatever he might need. He vows to do everything in his power to help, mentioning that he has also dealt with Director Zhang before. He advises that as long as Xiaoguo shows a cooperative attitude and a satisfying production plan, things will go smoothly. The authorities will clear many obstacles for him. Xiaoguo thanks Elder Tang for the reminder regarding their future business. The Elder expresses his hope that Xiaoguo will be patient as he begins involving the younger generation of the Tang family. Xiaoguo simply nods without saying a word, turning to leave the study, while Su-won follows close behind him. Elder Tang stands alone by the window, knowing that from this day on, the Tang family's fate is tied to Xiaoguo's. Not long after, we see Xiaoguo and Su-won arrive at the industrial park, where dozens of machines are waiting. There are excavators and bulldozers lined up next to massive mounds of cement and steel reinforcement bars. Beside them sit over a dozen large diesel generators. Soo-won insists that providing all this was simply their duty. She tells him to reach out if any issues arise before taking her leave, and Xiaoguo gives her a silent nod. Once Soo-won departs, Xiaoguo wastes no time, raising his hand to begin storing these steel beasts one by one. He pulls the mountains of cement and steel into his dimensional space, then drives his truck back to the small shop. After pulling down the rolling shutter to ensure privacy, he prepares for a quick transition between worlds. In an instant, we return to the apocalyptic world, where a dense, dark crowd has gathered in the main square. Yi Ying and the members of the Yi team have formed a human bridge to keep the excited survivors back. Meanwhile, the forces of the four major powers have finished deploying, setting up machine gun nests as a defensive perimeter. Xiaoguo slowly steps out of the shop and looks around, calmly ordering the central area to be cleared out. As soon as the words are spoken, the Yi team moves into action, quickly carving a path through the gathered crowd. They clear the largest open space in the center of the square, while Xiaoguo stands ready at the shop's entrance. With a simple wave of his hand, hundreds of bags of cement drop instantly, stacking neatly on the ground, followed by bundles of steel bars. Mountains of sand and gravel appear alongside crates of tools, and yet, this is merely the beginning of the display. Under the stunned gaze of every onlooker, massive pieces of construction machinery begin to slam onto the ground one by one. Gasps of disbelief ripple through the square, but Xiaoguo ignores the commotion, turning his attention solely to Yi Ying. He tells her to find the engineers and skilled workers to inspect the equipment and have the electricians start the generators. He orders the lighting equipment to be set up, wanting the entire area to be as bright as day. The rest are to be grouped to clear the foundation and lay the steel. Yi Ying listens and acts without a moment's hesitation. She raises her megaphone, her voice echoing across the square as she calls for anyone with engineering experience to step forward. Civil laborers are sent to the left, machine operators to the right, and those who can build power grids to the center. As soon as the words are spoken, the crowd moves quickly, beginning to flow into their designated sections across the square. Before long, 3 long lines have formed, stretching across the open space like columns of a new army. Yi Ying finishes her instructions and snaps her fingers, and in the next second, a surge of intense flames erupts from her hand. She melts a nearby steel pipe into liquid iron instantly, a subtle reminder that keeps the survivors focused and moving quickly. Work begins in earnest as several electricians start checking the fuel lines and connecting the heavy power cables. A moment later, the diesel generators let out a low, rhythmic roar, followed by the heavy rumble of bulldozer and excavator engines. One after another, the machines roar to life, filling the wasteland once again with the symphony of industrial civilization. The bulldozers begin clearing away vehicle wreckage and debris, while the survivors put on safety helmets and gloves to join in. Using primitive tools to pry up the old concrete and haul away rubble, over 1,000 people are now working in unison. Meanwhile, several massive cooking pots have already been set up at the edge of the site, and it isn't long before we smell the results. The rich aroma of meat broth drifts across the square, providing the survivors with the most powerful motivation they could ask for. Inside the ARC's command center, the captain and Bailu stand side by side, their eyes fixed on the electronic monitors. The captain speaks with a heavy, solemn tone, noting that Xiaoguo isn't just building a city, he is establishing a new order. Inside, people create out of hope, while outside, the soldiers fight to protect that very hope. Night falls quickly, yet the central square remains as bright as high noon under the floodlights. Steel bars shower sparks under the cutting machines, while bulldozers push the discarded concrete into deep trenches. Workers shout rhythmic chants as they heave foundation steel into the grooves. For a moment, it feels like the world before the end. The awakened members of the night duty squad call out to the crowd, telling everyone to stay sharp so they can eat sooner. Beyond the site, along the circular defense line, a commander uses his rifle to pick off zombies with clinical precision. He roars at his men to hold the line and let nothing slip through, or he'll personally see to their discipline. Just as his voice fades, Ying appears behind the defensive line with a message. She informs them that Mr. Guo wants them to send representatives to collect today's payment. The 4 commanders can't hide their delight as they follow Ying back toward the center of the square. We see Xiaoguo standing by the shop entrance, watching the progress. As they approach, he gives a casual wave of his hand. Small mountains of supplies appear out of thin air, including over 200 crates of canned luncheon meat. There are compressed biscuits, clean water, trauma medications, and even crates of strong liquor. To top it off, there are hundreds of cartons of cigarettes. The 4 commanders stand there, utterly speechless. Xiaoguo tells them this is the reward for the first day, to be split equally among their 4 factions. He turns and walks back into the shop, leaving the representatives standing in stunned silence for a long moment. Finally snapping out of it, they bark into their communicators, telling their men to get down here and move these supplies immediately. When the soldiers hear there is meat, tobacco, and alcohol, a thunderous cheer erupts across the entire defensive line. Before long, the trucks from the 4 major factions come roaring in, and under their representatives' command, they begin frantically loading the supplies. But just as the entire square is immersed in the joy of the harvest, a series of piercing screams suddenly erupts over the public channel. A massive horde of zombies is attacking Block 3 on the eastern side, and their numbers are simply beyond counting. In an instant, the soldiers' smiles freeze on their faces, and the survivors at the construction site begin to feel the creeping chill of fear. However, Shezi grabs a communicator and roars for them to remember the taste of the canned meat they just received. He orders them to hold their rifles steady and fire with everything they have to establish the first line of defense. As soon as his voice falls, the other commanders quickly issue the same orders to their own men. The soldiers' morale reaches an unprecedented high, and we see them quickly moving into their designated combat positions. They aim their muzzles toward the street entrance, yet back at the construction site, a sense of panic begins to spread. The survivors drop their tools, instinctively wanting to flee, but it is at this exact moment that Yi Ying's voice rings out. Her words manage to settle the crowd slightly, though to be honest, the underlying fear continues to linger in the air. By now, the vibration of the ground is becoming clearer, and at the end of the street, the horde pours out like a rising tide. A second later, dozens of machine guns along the circular defense line simultaneously spit out tongues of fire. A dense rain of bullets tears gaps through the tide of the dead, while the sound of explosions echoes through the night sky. The soldiers manage to hold the tide 200 meters away, but the sheer number of zombies is simply overwhelming. As the battle falls into a tense stalemate, a dull, heavy thud suddenly echoes from the rear of the zombie horde. A giant mutant zombie emerges, its entire body covered in a thick, keratinized shell that looks like natural armor. It ignores the grenades entirely and charges toward the defense line, just as a flash of fireflies from Yi Ying's hand. The mutant zombie's head is struck instantly, and the force of the impact sends its massive body tumbling forward with its own momentum. It finally slams into the fortifications, sending sandbags and barricades flying in every direction. But that monster never manages to stand up again, and seeing the opening, the other awakened ones finally begin to take action. For a moment, various abilities explode within the tide of the dead, yet the street is simply too wide for comfort. The horde cannot be eliminated quickly enough, and soon, screams and desperate pleas for help begin to clutter the communication channel. The battle grows increasingly brutal, and despite the undeniable bravery of the soldiers, the pressure is becoming unbearable. Inevitably, gaps begin to appear in the defense line as dozens of zombies break through the wall of fire and lung toward them. The soldiers are forced into a desperate hand-to-hand struggle as more and more of the undead continue to pour in. The entire defense line is now teetering on the brink of collapse, while back at the site, the survivors huddle together, trembling. Even Yi Ying's expression turns grim, but it is at this exact moment that we see our protagonist step forward from the shadows. In the next heartbeat, his figure vanishes, only to reappear dozens of meters away in a blur of motion. With a few more flashes of speed, he reaches a high vantage point, calmly looking down at the approaching sea of corpses. Every eye is now fixed on him, as a wooden crate suddenly appears before him and shatters into pieces. Dozens of steel balls spill out instantly, though instead of falling, they remain suspended in midair around him. Then, with a casual wave of his hand toward the horde, the steel balls form a metallic jet that screams forward. The sonic boom even drowns out the heavy gunfire, and in an instant, the zombies in front of the line are torn apart. Without missing a beat, a second wave of steel balls flies out, followed quickly by a third and a fourth. This torrent of metal crushes everything in its path, making him look like a human Gatling gun holding the line alone. He clears every living corpse within 50 meters of the defense, and suddenly, the entire square falls into an eerie silence. Only the dull hum of the generators remains, while the air itself grows heavy with the thick, metallic scent of blood. A moment later, he slowly descends from his perch, and we see every person present staring at him in absolute awe. It is as if they are witnessing a miracle, yet he simply speaks with total indifference, telling them to get back to work. Yi Ying is the first to snap back to reality, her voice booming through the loudspeakers as she commands everyone to get back to work. She reminds them that Mr. Gua doesn't keep idle people here, and a second later, the stunned crowd begins to stir. The survivors quickly return to their tasks, though we can see that a heavy sense of awe has taken root in every heart. Inside the Panshir stronghold, Yanwang watches the footage with a growing sense of helplessness before finally picking up his communicator. He issues a direct order. From this moment on, everyone in Panshir must obey Mr. Gua's arrangements without question. At the same time, within the Dungta stronghold, a white-robed scholar has already deduced that Gua possesses two distinct abilities. He sends his detailed analysis report back to headquarters, yet he receives only a single sentence in response. They tell him to abandon all testing and simply satisfy Mr. Gua's every need. While back at the shop, our protagonist takes a seat. He mentally reviews his recent actions, fully aware that leaving the safety of the shop carried its own set of risks. However, he had his reasons for choosing to intervene personally. After all, letting the defense line crumble was not an option. A breach would have meant certain casualties, and this served as the perfect opportunity to strike fear and respect into everyone. Most importantly, he wanted to show the four leaders that he isn't restricted to the four walls of his small shop. The high morale at the construction site proves his display was a success, confirming that in this world, power is the only true currency. With that thought, he sends a message to Ying, instructing her to clear the battlefield and collect the golden energy boxes. Upon hearing this, Ying quickly assembles the Nightblade squad and passes down the order to recover the boxes. The members of Nightblade move out instantly, and seeing this, the four commanders order their own soldiers to assist them. Thanks to their combined efforts, the entire battlefield is cleared of debris and spoils in less than half an hour. Ying carries over a dozen buckets of golden boxes to the shop entrance, where Guo gives the pile a casual wave of his hand. In an instant, half of the golden boxes vanish into thin air, while the other half remains sitting in the buckets. He looks towards Xie and the other three commanders, telling them to divide the remaining half among their four factions. The four commanders catch their breath in unison, insisting that since Mr. Guo won the battle, the credit belongs to him alone. They feel it isn't right to take so much, but he simply waves a hand, noting that anyone who fought deserves a reward. Xie offers his sincere thanks, and the others quickly follow suit before they begin dividing the golden boxes among themselves. We see Guo turn toward the survivors and raise his hand, shouting for the meal to begin, which triggers an immediate explosion of cheers. The survivors drop their tools instantly, rushing toward the steaming field pots with a desperate, almost frantic energy. Members of the Nightblade squad step forward to maintain order, warning that anyone who cuts the line will go hungry today. The survivors settle down at once, as you might expect, and begin forming long, orderly lines across the site. Food is distributed rapidly, and as soon as they receive their lunchboxes, countless people squat down to devour the meal. Some are even moved to tears by the simple taste of meat, the savory aroma drifting heavily across the entire square. The soldiers gather around tables as well, each served 8 dishes and a soup, with plenty of cigarettes and drinks to go around. They eat heartily, laughing and talking loudly without a single care in the world, a rare moment of peace, to be sure. The previous tension and exhaustion vanish completely, and an hour later, everyone has eaten their fill and rested well. At this point, the site foreman stands up and pats his stomach, announcing that it's time to get back to work and skip sleep tonight. He urges them to finish pouring all the foundations before dawn, and his words are met with a thunderous roar from 1,000 voices. Without a single word of complaint, the survivors pick up their tools and return to their posts, looking more energetic than ever. The roar of machinery starts up once again, just as the relief troops from the 4 major factions arrive to take their shift. They stare at the messy tables and catch the lingering scent of food in the air, feeling a pang of regret for their timing. They can only kick themselves for not volunteering for the first shift, but then Ying appears with several large crates. The boxes are filled with brand new cigarettes, a gift from Mr. Guo to help the brothers on duty stay sharp and refreshed. She tells them there's plenty more once those are gone, sparking a wave of excitement among the soldiers who just arrived. Mr. Guo's generosity is truly something to behold, and as the soldiers receive their brand new cigarettes, their previous annoyance and complaints vanish. In an instant, their frustration is replaced by pure excitement, and countless pillars of smoke begin to rise into the air. A look of blissful relaxation spreads across their faces. We then see the time reach 3 o'clock in the morning. The noise on the construction site hasn't diminished at all. If anything, the energy has only grown more intense. Several massive concrete pump trucks let out a heavy roar, and a moment later, the gray concrete slurry begins to flow. It pours steadily through the delivery pipes, being precisely channeled into the deep pits of the foundation. The site foreman watches the progress with visible excitement, and it is at this very moment that a messenger arrives. A member of the Nightblade squad approaches the old foreman, telling him that Mr. Guo is looking for him, which makes the man pause in surprise. He doesn't hesitate for long, quickly jogging toward the small building where Guo is sitting calmly on a chair by the door. The foreman stops at the entrance with an air of deep respect, asking what is needed, and Guo nods without wasting any words on pleasantries. He hands over a blueprint, noting that while the foundation work is good, the wall sections require a few specific modifications. As the foreman takes the structural drawing, he sees a series of densely packed holes clearly marked across the design. Before the foreman can even ask a question, Guo explains the plan in a calm, matter-of-fact tone. The interior of the walls must include reserved firing ports and internal passages, with battlements and observation towers built along the top. He also specifies cable conduits to be pre-installed, making it easier to set up cameras and powerful searchlights later on. Guo wants this wall to do more than just block the zombies. He intends for it to be a tool for eliminating them entirely. He tells the man not to worry about labor or materials, and the foreman's breathing grows heavy as he realizes what he's looking at. He recognizes it immediately as a standard military fortification, and he looks up at Guo with a newfound sense of absolute determination. He vows to complete the mission, and with the blueprints gripped tightly in his hand, he turns and runs back to the site. The foreman immediately gathers all the technical staff, using the new drawings to explain the key points over and over again. As the sky begins to turn a pale gray, we see the survivors working with eyes that are bloodshot from exhaustion. And yet, there isn't a trace of fatigue on their faces, only the pure, raw excitement of a job well done. By now, the foundation has been completely poured, and several engineers are gathered tightly around the blueprints. They are busy crafting strangely shaped molds out of steel, which are designed to be fixed directly into the structure. These will be placed between the steel skeletons of the walls, waiting for the next pour of heavy concrete. Once set, they will form standard firing ports and internal corridors, a design that has made the construction much harder. The difficulty is several levels higher than before, but no one complains. Deep down, they all understand the stakes. This solid wall is the only hope for their survival, and before long, a crane begins to lift the first section. It is lowered slowly and positioned with perfect precision onto the foundation, aligning seamlessly with the embedded steel bars. At that moment, the entire site erupts in thunderous cheers as the survivors wave their tools in the air. Even through their bloodshot eyes, tears of joy begin to well up as they witness the fruits of their labor. Nearby, the soldiers passing by during their shift change stop and stare, completely mesmerized by the transformation. Every one of them marvels at the sheer strength of the wall, and just then, the aroma of food drifts through the air again. Yang's voice rings out, calling everyone for breakfast, and we see several tables piled high with steaming food. There is hot white rice porridge and meat buns fresh from the steamer. The workers drop their tools the moment they see it. They form a long, orderly line, and this time, no one is wolfing down their food in a desperate panic. They eat slowly and with dignity, as if they've briefly returned to the peaceful lives they once knew. Gua steps out of the small shop and calls Yang over, telling her he will be leaving for about 12 hours. He places her in full charge, instructing her that the construction must not stop and that she must coordinate with the 4 major factions. He tells her to keep recruiting without worry. As long as they pass the background check, they are cleared to work. Yang listens and responds with a solemn nod, promising to handle everything while we see the bustling scene continue behind her. After that, Gua turns back toward the small shop and activates his shuttle ability, returning to the real world and arriving at his destination 30 minutes later. He stands before the Yuanxing Technology Office building, where Zhang Yi is already waiting anxiously at the entrance to greet him. Zhang Yi informs him that Director Zhang and his team are waiting in the upstairs conference room, and Gua nods before heading inside. Not long after, they enter the room to find a middle-aged man sitting upright in a chair with an air of quiet authority. This is Director Zhang from the Department of Energy, and we see his secretary standing dutifully right behind him. Upon seeing him, Director Zhang stands up and remarks that Gua is quite young and capable, while Gua extends a hand with a polite smile. Gua offers a respectful greeting, and once everyone is seated, Zhang Yi begins the formal presentation regarding the company's development plans. Director Zhang listens intently while his secretary's pen flies across a notebook. 10 minutes later, the presentation finally draws to a close. As soon as Zhang Yi finishes, Director Zhang is the first to speak, noting that he has already reviewed the technical reports. He admits the technology is revolutionary, but he wants to know if the source of such a breakthrough is truly reliable. He questions the security of future upgrades and the speed of production recovery, which causes Zhang Yi's heart to skip a beat. However, Gua's expression remains perfectly calm as he explains that the source of the technology is a trade secret he cannot disclose. He guarantees that the technology is entirely under his personal control and that no patent disputes will ever arise, which is a bold claim, indeed. He adds that upgrades are already planned through the 5th generation and that production can be fully restored within a single month. The only thing that might slow them down, he notes, is the administrative approval process. At this, a faint smile touches Director Zhang's lips. It is a meaningful look, and the director tells him not to worry about approvals, though he does have one specific suggestion. He proposes that the state provide capital to form a new joint venture to co-develop the project alongside them. In exchange for producing the Yuanxing battery series together, the state would provide comprehensive policy support and protection. However, Director Zhang's face visibly darkens when he realizes that his proposal hasn't been immediately accepted. Gua looks him in the eye and explains that he isn't sitting here today to seek help, but rather to give the state an opportunity. It is a chance to take a leading position in the global energy revolution, and as for the matter of cooperation, he proposes establishing a new sales company specifically to handle orders for military industry and national strategic projects. However, he insists that Yuanxing Technology must hold a 90% stake, a firm bottom line that shifts the atmosphere instantly. The temperature in the room seems to drop to freezing as Director Zhang's face visibly darkens with displeasure. Gua repeats his stance firmly, making it clear that his presence is a gesture of strategic partnership, not a plea for assistance. The director's expression remains grim, likely thinking that without the state's approval, these batteries might never even leave the building. Hearing this unspoken threat, Gua simply leans back in his chair with a relaxed posture, as if he hasn't a care in the world. He asks the director which is truly more important, the administrative approval process or liberating the nation from energy constraints forever. He reveals that the energy density of their 5th-generation technology is 3 times that of the Yuanxing 1, and prototypes are already being tested. His technology could remain here in Huaxia, he notes, but it could just as easily be placed in any other country. A chilling thought, indeed. As the words hang in the air, Director Zhang feels a cold shiver down his spine, realizing he cannot bear the responsibility of losing such tech to rivals. After a long moment of tense silence, Director Zhang suddenly stands up and asks for permission to make a quick phone call. With that, the director pulls out his phone and steps out of the room. 2 minutes later, he returns with a completely different aura. Taking a deep breath, he announces that they agree to all of Guo's conditions, and that is not all. The state will provide every possible support without any upper limit, and upon hearing this, Guo slowly extends his hand. He suggests a successful cooperation, and Director Zhang immediately grips his hand firmly, echoing the sentiment with a look of immense relief.